Ooh, hey guys. Apparently it already went through my music playlist. My bad. Oh, hey Romeo, I see you. Dang. Alright, well, let's go ahead and get the stream started. What you say? Alright. Alright, welcome to Spooky Sunday. And if you hear some munching, that's because I'm eating dinner.
My bear is full. Don't cry.
What the hell are you talking about? Would you shush?
I just joking.
I'm streaming. Be quiet. Anyways.
Why?
Anyway. So yeah. Let's just go ahead and get this stream started, eh? Starting with a Lazy Masquerade, 3 disturbing unsolved mysteries from Japan. Hello. Be stuttering like that.
Just before we start the video, I'm excited to announce that the Lazy Masquerade plush is now officially on sale. I personally designed these little creeps with the team over at U2's, and the final product is better than I ever imagined. They're high quality and super detailed. Complete with my avatar's Japanese Hanyu mask, dusty pinstripe suit, disheveled hair, and color scheme, this devilishly cute, limited edition plush is the perfect companion to snuggle up in bed with this spooky season. And when I say they're limited, I really mean it. Once these channel mascots sell out, they'll be gone for good, so grab them while they're still hot over at u2s.com. Click the link down in the description or comment section, and let the spirit of Halloween into your heart with this Oni demon, who you just can't help but love. Japan's an extremely safe country, with a low crime rate. But when a crime does occur there, the perps always seem to crank things up to 11. With that in mind, let's kick today's video off with a grim story that's not for the faint of heart. It was the 23rd of May, 1979. Keiko Mizuno, 32, and Eiko Akashi, 43, were 2 housewives who lived in the small and sleepy city of Nagao Kakyo. Despite their 11-year age gap, both Keiko and Eiko were close friends and worked together part-time at a supermarket located in front of Nagaoka Tenshin train station. Sometime between 10 and 11 AM, the pair finished their morning shift and set off on their bicycles to visit a bracken grove on Noyama Mountain. There, they planned to gather up some warabi, a fern used to make a delicious mochi dessert, which they planned to give to their friends and family.
How nice.
For reference, Noyama Mountain isn't exactly the wilderness you may have pictured in your mind. In fact, the bamboo grove was only a couple of kilometers from the supermarket they had clocked off from, and was a popular spot for locals to gather plants and shoots. Keiko and Eiko left their bicycles at the foot of the mountain and walked up the pathway to the grove, arriving sometime around noon. Neither of them would ever come back down alive.
Oh no.
That afternoon, Keiko's husband received
Hey
a
Mert,
call
hope I'm not too
informing
late.
him
Nope,
that
you're
his
just in
wife
time. We
hadn't
just
picked up
started.
their son from nursery school. He was of course concerned to hear that. With this being 1979, he didn't exactly have a way to contact Keiko. As such, he went to search for her up on the bracken grove where he knew she had gone to that day with Eiko, but he couldn't find any trace of either woman. When neither Keiko or Eiko returned home the following morning, both of their husbands finally reported them missing.
Alright, in a little bit.
50 firefighters and a pack of sniffer dogs combed Noyama Mountain in search of the 2 missing housewives, but all they could find were
Well,
their
it is
bicycles,
almost dinner time
still
for you.
where they had left them. It wouldn't be until
Give me a
10:30
minute and
AM
I'll go make
on the
something for you and come
25th,
back.
a full 2 days after Keiko and Eiko went missing, that their bodies were finally discovered, lying just 10 meters apart in a heavily wooded area on Noyama.
Oof.
Both women had been slaughtered,
Oh my
but in
god.
vastly different ways. Keiko had been stabbed more than 50 times
Oh my
with
God.
a sharp kitchen knife. The blade had been left embedded in her chest.
Jesus.
Her lungs, heart, and several other organs had been punctured. She had been left undressed from the waist down,
What's my legs?
and her jeans, underwear, and shoes were
'Cause you're
found
up under
close to
that-
her body.
Fluffy blanket.
As for Eiko, she had been strangled to death. None of her clothes had been removed, but traces of the perp's
Yes,
bodily
Luna, I
fluids
heard you.
were
Now
found
keep
on
it
her
down. I'm
remains.
streaming.
From those fluids, it was determined that the killer's blood type was O.
Do I need to send you out of the
Though
room?
both women had ultimately met their ends through different
Well, I
violent
told you,
means,
quiet down.
both Keiko and Eiko suffered similar wounds prior to their deaths. They had both been repeatedly punched and kicked, and had suffered numerous broken bones and bruises.
Oh my God.
Eiko had been so severely beaten that her liver had ruptured. These injuries had been caused by someone strong, possibly someone with martial arts training. The most gruesome detail, though, was that both Keiko and Eiko's Achilles tendons had been sliced through to the bone
Oh,
to prevent
jeez.
them from escaping. And this was likely one of the first wounds each woman sustained. From there, they were at their killer's mercy, unable to run or even walk to safety. Experts believe that the attack took place sometime between 12 p.m. and 2:30 p.m. Empty bento boxes found inside the women's rucksacks suggested that they had both had time to eat lunch prior to the incident. Investigators searched the pockets of both victims. Inside Eiko's right jeans pocket, they found a crumpled up supermarket receipt. Turns out that she had left detectives a final clue. Scribbled on the back of the receipt, in Eiko's handwriting, was this message: "We're being followed. Please, help us. This man is a bad person." The fact that the message had been written so sloppily, with certain simple kanji strokes being missed out completely, suggested that Eiko had written the note under extreme duress.
Well, yeah, I
They
imagine.
theorized that she planned to secretly hand the note to a passerby, but obviously never got the chance. The pencil used to write the note was the only item missing from the scene. None of the women's other possessions had been taken. This hadn't been a robbery gone wrong. This had been the work of an opportunistic sadist. Or perhaps, sadists. A construction team were present in the area that day. 2 young workers, referred to as K and M by the media, were allegedly seen rushing down the mountain around 2 p.m., just around the time the women were slain. These men were said to be Yankees, the word Japanese people use for juvenile delinquents.
Oh.
One of these men, K, was also said to practice karate,
You
They
know,
were
in
both
America,
questioned,
Yankee means something
but
different.
ultimately
And
cleared
UK.
as suspects in the case. So if K and M weren't responsible for the slayings, who was? Well, there are a few theories. As well as the builders, a further 15 people are known to have been on the mountain in the days preceding Keiko and Eiko's untimely and brutal ends. One of them is of particular interest. Just 6 days before the killings, a middle-aged man was seen speaking to a woman about warabi ferns. This man was described as being a salaryman type, and was wearing a polo shirt, smart trousers, and leather office shoes. Not the sort of outfit you'd expect someone to be wearing on a hike up the mountains. His attire was of interest to the authorities though, since a set of footprints found near Keiko and Eiko's bodies had been made by a pair of shoes without any indentations or patterns on the soles. Say, by a pair of office shoes. Half a year prior to the slayings, a male, aged between 40 and 45, had reportedly harassed a woman on Noyama Mountain, about 300 meters from where Keiko and Eiko would later be discovered. This man was approximately 5'7", had a strong build, and was dressed in grey work clothes with a peaked cap. He called out to the woman, saying something along the lines of, "Hey honey, have you managed to harvest any ferns?"
I guess creepy old
Noticing that
dudes
he was holding a 30
transcend
centimeter long
culture.
blade in his hand, the woman ran to her husband, who was picking ferns a short distance away with their child. They later contacted the authorities about the incident. This sketch of the man was released to the public, but his identity remains a mystery to this day, and it's unknown whether he was the same salaryman type witnessed on the mountain shortly before Keiko and Eiko were slain. Around that same time in 1978, Akiko Maeda, a 38-year-old woman who had been jogging at night, disappeared just 10 kilometers from where the two housewives were slain. Her remains have never been found, but a long blood trail found at the scene suggested that she had been dragged into a vehicle and disposed of elsewhere. Could this have been the work of the same killer? 5 years after the Bracken murders, almost to the day in fact, on May 16th, 1984, 48-year-old Kyoko Kinoshita was found stabbed to death in the same city of Nagaokakyo,
Oh my gosh.
this time inside her own home. She had been punctured in the back and neck before being wrapped up in a futon. Whoever took her life then set that futon ablaze. O-type blood was again found at the scene. The eeriest part? Kyoko just so happened to work at the exact same supermarket as Keiko and Eiko. I've also seen some reports claim that Kyoko was actually with Keiko and Eiko on the mountain the day they were slain, but fortuitously went back home after eating lunch with them, effectively cheating death, at least for 5 years. Since I can't find any concrete evidence that Kyoko was actually with the two other housewives that day, I can only assume that last part's an urban rumor. Regardless, it's strongly believed that Kyoko's case and that of Keiko and Eiko's are linked. And, just like Keiko and Eiko before her, Kyoko's slaying also remains unsolved. Japan's famous for a lot of things. Amazing food, scenic landscapes, 8-day work weeks, but few things are more Japanese than vending machines.
That's true.
Sure, they're not exclusive to the country by any means, but an astonishing number of these contraptions line the country's streets. From
We're
the
not going
biggest
to talk
city
about the ones
to the
with
humblest
underpants
little
in
town.
them.
Personally, I was once caught in a blizzard on top of a mountain there, trapped in my friend's car for hours, awaiting rescue. And wouldn't you know, there just so happened to be a vending machine right outside the car that kept us fed and watered. It truly is the land of convenience. But, unfortunately, when a place has a good thing going, there's always someone out there who wants to ruin it. This is the story of the vending machine serial killer. April 1985, Fukuyama, Hiroshima. A 45-year-old man stopped by a vending machine to quench his thirst. Atop the machine, he found an unopened bottle of Oronomin C, a popular fizzy drink. After quickly inspecting the bottle, he considered it to be a freebie and took it home with him. There, he popped it open and enjoyed it. But that would turn out to be a fatal decision. The man soon began suffering from intense stomach cramps and was rushed to hospital.
He
His
got
vomit was
poisoned.
examined, and doctors discovered that the man had somehow consumed paraquat, a toxic herbicide used by gardeners to kill weeds and unwanted plants. Consuming a mere drop of paraquat burns holes in the drinker's throat and invariably results in lung congestion and death. There's no antidote. It's an extremely painful way to go, and for this unfortunate 45-year-old truck driver, that's the way he went. He passed on May 2nd, his final days being nothing but agony.
Poor guy.
Now, you don't need to be a detective to work out how the paraquat got into the man's stomach. The Oronomin C. Somebody had injected the herbicide through the screw top. Most people at the time didn't realize that this had been an intentional murder though, and in the minds of many, including the authorities, the man's death was simply a one-off. Perhaps he had ingested the paraquat deliberately, a dramatic way to end his own existence. In Japan, that wasn't unheard of.
Yeah.
And so, for the rest of the country, vending machines were nothing to be afraid of. But that all changed 5 months later, in September. On the 11th of that month, a 52-year-old man purchased a bottle of Oronomin C in Izumisano. As he bent down to collect his drink, he found a second bottle lying in the dispenser. He gathered up both bottles and drank them, and, as you can guess, perished 3 days later. Paraquat was again bound in his system and inside one of the bottles. He had just fallen victim to the same death trap as the truck driver 5 months prior.
Oh no.
The incident back in April had, in all likelihood, been nothing more than a test run for the killer, and now that they knew their methodology worked, they were about to up the ante. At this point, you may be wondering why both of these men would drink from seemingly abandoned bottles. Well, it's not actually as weird as it sounds. At the time, Oronomin C happened to be running a campaign. For every bottle of their drink purchased at a vending machine, there was a chance that an extra bottle would be dispensed for free.
Huh.
The odds of winning an extra beverage were actually quite high. As Steosphere noted in their excellent write-up of this case over on the Unsolved Mysteries subreddit, there was a widespread pay-it-forward culture in Japan at the time, and so it wasn't uncommon to visit a vending machine and find that some generous soul had left his or her extra bottle behind for the next passerby. Unfortunately, the killer was aware of this, and that September he took advantage of his fellow countrymen's trusting nature. On the 12th of September, just 1 day after the second victim had consumed his fatal beverage, a 22-year-old male in Matsusaka purchased a bottle of Real Gold, another popular soft drink, and found a second bottle in the dispenser.
Uh-oh.
Little did he realize that this second bottle had been poisoned, this time with diquat, another toxic herbicide. He perished 2 days later.
Oh my god.
On the 19th, a 30-year-old male in Echizen found an unattended bottle of soda at a vending machine and drank it. He died 3 days later. A 45-year-old man in Mia.
I was just thinking, this reminds me of those Tylenol murders a few decades ago in America. It's making me think of that.
Konojo
Very similar.
also died that same day after drinking an abandoned bottle of Real Gold, which he had found in a vending dispenser. A 50-year-old male perished in early October after drinking from a bottle of Oronomin C, which he had found in a machine in Habikino. 4 more men also died in October after ingesting paraquat poisoned drinks. Soon, the similarity between all of these cases caught the media's attention, and people began avoiding vending machines altogether. The slayings finally came to an end in November, but not before 2 final victims lost their lives.
Oh my gosh, man.
This time, a 48-year-old man in Saitama and a 17-year-old girl in the Kodama district. She was the only female victim of the vending machine killer.
Huh.
The government began placing warning signs on every vending machine throughout the country, telling people not to drink from left-behind beverages. The manufacturers of Oronomin C replaced their bottle screw caps with pull tabs, and the general public were now much more weary about the dangers of abandoned consumables. Either as a result of greater public awareness, or for an entirely different reason altogether, the poisonings came to an abrupt stop after the first female victim perished. During their investigation, the detectives first had to confirm that all of the poisonings had been the work of one individual. As mentioned, all of the victims had been killed by drinks laced with paraquat. That is, all but one of them.
Yeah.
The third victim, who had been poisoned with diquat. That was the only discrepancy in the perp's modus operandi. Otherwise, the killer's work was remarkably consistent. Too consistent not to be the work of one person. For example, the perp had only ever left poisoned bottles in quiet areas with no CCTV cameras. He had left them at machines dotted all over the map, and clearly had no connection to the people whose lives he was taking. He had never been seen by any witnesses leaving his deadly concoctions behind. He had never once tried to contact the police to brag about his actions, and hadn't left behind any notes to taunt the families of the victims, or to make any demands. He had never left behind any DNA evidence for the forensic teams to analyze, and he ended his rampage early before getting carried away, and never struck again.
Huh.
To put it simply, he had been extremely thorough, and had made the investigative team's work almost impossible. There was absolutely nothing to link anyone to the poisonings, And, as such, the identity of the vending machine killer remains a mystery to this very day. Their motive for slaying so many random innocents remains just as unclear.
I don't
Many
know.
have theorized
Maybe
that the man
because
behind the
they
vending machine
felt like it.
slayings
Sometimes
wasn't actually a
it's as
man at
simple
all,
as that.
but a woman who specifically targeted men. The fact that 11 of the 12 victims were male surely can't be a coincidence. Ornament C was specifically marketed towards a male consumer, and most of the vending machines that the killer struck were in so-called salaryman areas, near offices that had mostly male workers. The fact that the poisonings abruptly stopped after a female died could also be significant. The perp may have felt that they had made a mistake and decided to stop before accidentally taking the life of another woman. Still, that's just one hypothesis. Others have
It's not a
suggested
bad one.
that the perp may have actually been a student on university break. That could explain how they had time to travel the length and breadth of the country, and why the killing stopped around the time that university students went back to school. Ultimately, we don't know who was behind the slayings, and seeing how the statute of limitations ran out on this case back in 2000, we almost certainly never will. But, in all likelihood, the perpetrator is still out there, roaming the vending machine-lined streets of Japan, and you can't help but wonder what they feel every time they pass by one. Is it guilt or satisfaction? Located on Japan's Shikoku Island, Tokushima Prefecture is a popular getaway spot for hikers and nature lovers. The entire prefecture has a population of just 750,000 people, making it one of the least populated areas of the entire country. But back in 1989, this quiet and peaceful part of Japan was the setting of one of its darkest unsolved mysteries.
Oh, my bad.
On
I
March
didn't even know
6th
this
of
thing was
that
off
year,
center.
4-year-old Shinya Matsuoka arrived in the town of Sadamitsu, Tokushima, with his parents and 2 siblings. The Matsuoka family had traveled all the way from Ibaraki to attend the funeral of Shinya's maternal grandmother, which was to take place the following day. They stayed at a relative's house just outside the town in the mountains. On the morning of the 7th, at around 8 AM, Shinya, his father Masanobu, and his 2-year-old brother all went for a walk around the local neighborhood, which consisted of a few residential houses lining a road that led down into the main town. They didn't cross paths with many other people, other than a few field workers. After 10 minutes or so, the father, Masanobu, suggested they all head back, but Shinya was adamant that he wanted to walk for a bit longer. Masanobu said sure, but first they had to drop Shinya's brother back at the accommodation. The trio walked back to their relative's home. Leading up to the house was a 10-meter-long staircase. Masanobu carried Shinya's brother all the way to the top, with Shinya making his way up behind them. As Masanobu reached the entrance, he claims that he turned to see Shinya very close behind him at the top of the stairs. Masanobu stepped into the home and handed Shinya's 2-year-old brother over to his wife, something that took 20 seconds at most. It was at that point that Masanobu turned around and noticed that Shinya hadn't followed him into the house. He stepped onto the porch outside, and, to his horror, Shinya was nowhere to be seen.
Oh, no.
He wasn't on the stairs leading up to the house.
Oh,
He
hey,
wasn't
Owie.
standing on the street below. In a matter of seconds, he had vanished into thin air. But that was impossible. Shinya had been right behind him. He'd seen him make it to the top of the stairs just moments prior. Masanobu only had his back turned for a few seconds at most. The whole family searched the entire property, both inside and out, but no trace of Shinya could be found anywhere. Within no time, a thorough search of the surrounding mountains was underway, with firefighters and police officers combing every square inch of the neighborhood. This search would continue for 3 months straight, but Shinya would never be found. At first, the authorities strongly believed that Shinya had wandered off by himself and gotten lost. The facts did all seem to suggest that was the case. After all, the area was quite remote, and the house the family were staying at was located at the end of the street. There was no reason for anyone who didn't live there to be there. Nobody outside the neighborhood knew the Matsuoka family was staying there either. The field workers, who were only 100 meters away from the scene of the incident, hadn't seen or heard any strange vehicles pass by when the boy disappeared. Neither Shinya's father nor mother heard a peep from the boy when he vanished. So even if some opportunist happened to be hiding in the bushes, it just wasn't plausible that he or she could snatch the boy up and make him disappear so stealthily in such a short space of time. But Shinya was a smart lad. He knew his parents' phone numbers by heart, and could even recite the address of the relative's house they were staying at. If he had wandered off and gotten lost, surely he could have found his way back, or asked someone for help. And though their relative's house was outside the main town, it wasn't like it was miles from civilization. There were still people living nearby, particularly to the east of where the family was staying. Was it possible that someone living there had taken Shinya? Chillingly, the night before he disappeared, a worried-looking Shinya ran up to his parents whilst inside the relative's house, and said, "He's looking for me. He's gonna find me."
Oh.
It's unclear whether that was just the imaginative ramblings of a child, or whether Shinya had actually seen someone outside his window that night. Now, here's where the plot really thickens. On March 16th, 9 days after Shinya went missing, the Matsuoka family received a mysterious phone call at their relative's house. Shinya's father, Masanobu, answered it. A female voice on the other end of the line asked him, "Is your wife there?" Masanobu passed the phone to his wife. "I am Mariko Nakahara's mother," the voice said. "My child is in Group Moon of the Seikei Kindergarten." Shinya's mother immediately recognized the name of the school. It's where Shinya's sister went to kindergarten, back in Ibaraki. But that was odd, she thought, since the woman on the other end of the line spoke with a distinct Tokushima accent. "We've all put together some money to support you. Where should we send it to? Are you returning home soon?" Shinya's mother told the woman that the family were returning to Ibaraki the following day. The family did return home, but they didn't hear back from the woman about the money. Shinya's mother felt uncomfortable calling up the school to ask about it, but after some time, she decided that she better make an inquiry. She phoned up the kindergarten and asked what the situation was with regards to the condolence fund. The principal of the school was confused to say the least, and told Shinya's mother that no such money had been collected that they knew about. Shinya's mother said there must be some kind of mistake, that Mariko Nakahara's mother had collected some money to help support them. "I'm sorry," replied the principal, "but no girl named Mariko Nakahara goes to school here." That's when it dawned on Shinya's mother. How on earth would one of the other mothers at the school have gotten a hold of her relative's phone number? That didn't make any sense at all. But whoever the mystery caller was, they knew that number. They knew the name of that kindergarten back in Ibaraki, and they spoke with that distinct Tokushima accent. Had Shinya's mother actually been speaking with the person who had taken her son? After learning that the condolence fund didn't exist, she immediately told her husband, Masanobu. His first instinct was that the mystery caller was the person holding their son captive. Thankfully, he had actually set up a recording device on the house's phone after Shinya vanished, and the call made by the mystery woman had been recorded onto a cassette. He contacted the authorities and gave them only recording of the conversation. Suspiciously, the police never bothered to investigate who had made the call, and somehow lost the recording that Masanobu had given them.
What?
To this day, we still don't know who made that bizarre phone call, or why. In the years that followed, numerous reported sightings of Shinya were made to the authorities. In May of 1989, just 2 months after the boy went missing, a man was seen walking with a child who bore a strong resemblance to Shinya on a beach in Tokushima. When the witness tried to get a good look at the boy's face, the man turned him away and rushed the boy into a waiting white vehicle.
Oh no.
The beach where the sighting occurred is an area where North Korean ships are known to pass. In 1990, 2 alleged sightings of the boy were reported. One came from a housewife who was certain that she had seen Shinya in Tokushima City. The other came from a man in Yamagata who believed that he had seen Shinya outside a shopping mall. The father, Masanobu, who had quit his job to search for his missing son, personally investigated both of these leads and handed out missing person flyers to people at both locations. Locals outside the mall in Yamagata confirmed that they had in fact seen the boy with an unidentified man. In 1995, an elderly man in Hokkaido disturbingly reported that he knew someone who had, quote, received a boy named Shinya as a gift.
What?
In 1997, a woman met a young boy who strongly resembled Shinya at a train station in Yokohama. The boy had marks on his wrists and looked sickly and unwell. He told the woman that he was being poorly treated by an older man. She gave the boy her number and told him to call her if he ever needed help. The boy called her just once after that, but she was unable to find out where he was living.
Aw, man.
Finally, in 1998, a cashier in Chugoku reported seeing a boy with marks on his wrists, shopping with what looked like a typical Yakuza type.
Oh
The
no.
Yakuza appeared to be keeping a close eye on the boy, who strongly resembled the missing poster of Shinya. The cashier told his boss about the situation, and they both went to get a good look at the boy. But by that point, he and the Yakuza were already gone.
Oh no.
None of these supposed sightings led to any new breakthroughs. Unfortunately, for the past 33 years, Shinya Matsuoka's whereabouts and well-being remain a mystery, as do the circumstances surrounding his vanishing. Perhaps the boy's curious nature got the better of him. Perhaps he somehow ran off in the space of 20 seconds, and his remains have been lost in the steep Tokushima mountains for the past 3 decades.
Well, that's sad to think about.
Perhaps someone had been watching him from afar that morning, and somehow swept him up in the short space of time his father's back was turned. A sick neighbor, or a local worker. Or perhaps it's a mix of both. The boy walked off by himself, only to run into the wrong person. The first theory makes the most sense logically. After all, nobody saw or heard anything or anyone suspicious when the boy disappeared, and Masanobu may have had his back turned for longer than 20 seconds like he claimed. But given the mysterious phone call to Shinya's mother, and all the sightings that were reported in the subsequent years, it's hard to rule out foul play. Unfortunately, whatever did happen to Shinya, the outcome was either death or a fate worse than it. In 2018, it seemed as if a miracle had occurred. A man named Ryuto Wada appeared on national television, claiming to be Shinya Matsuoka, the boy who had vanished so many years before. He was the correct age, and looked just like the missing lad.
Oh, he does.
Shinya's parents were filled with hope that their son was alive and well, and that they were about to be reunited with him 3 decades after he had been taken from them. But, alas, a DNA test confirmed that this was just a cruel hoax.
Aw.
And, to this day, the
Man.
Matsuoka family are still searching for the truth about their son's fate.
Damn, that's awful.
Just before the video ends, I'd like to say a huge thank you to all of my supporters here on YouTube and over on Patreon, especially my biggest supporters. The deck of cards: Mrs. Yvonne Rankin, Brad Hammer 33, Zane, The Only Dorita, Taylor and Monica Gruenk, Philip Wester, Peter Logdrach, Natalie Escobedo, Monica Mendoza, Lyndon Witebski, Leonardo Martinez, Larry Mattingly, Infamous Sempapi, Ian Billock, Grace Archie, Gina Valera, George Lopez, Fortnite Girl 666, Dustin and Tiffany Vanderpool, Connor Lotham, Colin Monsma, Chief Kochuake, Azrael Warakai, Asia Mina,
How do I have the
Anya
captions
Yekaterina
on?
Faustov, Alex Greensall, Clayton Thompson, Jesse Jug, Peyton Trolling, Itai Allen, Jacqueline Guevara Phelan, Torpid Chair 1139, Lydia Cumer, and Nephus 1988. Thank you guys so much for your continued support. Be sure to check out those Lazy Masquerade plushes, and you'll be hearing from me again very soon. Until then, you all stay spooky. And remember, the best things happen
In the dark.
in the dark.
Warning, your attention please. If you need assistance.
Holy crap, that was loud. Sorry. Okay, I gotta go take care of something, so I will be right back. Hang on. Whew. Okay, hey guys. Sorry about the long wait. Had to take care of things with the youngin. Romeo, there's a bad message. You didn't take care of it. Alright. Alright, here we go.
Assistance, please notify the theater box office or concession manager.
Years ago, I uncovered the mysterious missing persons case of Amy Lynn Bradley, who vanished on a cruise ship back in 1998. In this episode of Seriously Strange, we revisit this case and uncover more of the disturbing details behind it than I was originally able to. So turn off the lights, settle in, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel, because you won't want to miss what I have next. Now, let's begin. This episode's sponsored by Fishing Clash. Have you ever found yourself wanting to go fishing, but the kraken in the lake near your house keeps trying to eat you? Or maybe you're like me and you caught a pair of underwear as a kid and now you're emotionally scarred? Well, worry no more, because Fishing Clash has got you covered. With great graphics, a large assortment of rods and lures, and tons of insane fish to catch, there's no wonder why Fishing Clash is so popular. It's been the best episodes of series. This is a case of an especially cautionary nature and is one that I covered briefly in one of my earliest episodes of Seriously Strange. It's been the better part of a decade since then, but unfortunately, Amy Lynn Bradley is still missing. It was late March of 1998. Amy Lynn Bradley and her family were enjoying a cruise ship vacation. It was a prize that Amy's father had won and was supposed to be a fun, carefree time, but it turned into the whole Bradley family's worst nightmare, and into a mystery that has lingered and haunted America ever since. The Bradley family boarded the Rhapsody of the Seas, a cruise ship operated by Royal Caribbean. The ship itself had only taken its maiden voyage less than a year before Amy and her family took their trip. With the capacity to carry over 3,000 people, a cruise ship of its size is like a floating city on the ocean. The possibility of becoming lost is a good one if you don't know where you're going, or if there isn't someone around to assist you, or even worse, if there are people lurking on board who are looking to make sure you get lost to begin with. Amy was only 23, young, beautiful, with a long future ahead of her. She'd recently graduated from college in Virginia and had gotten a degree in physical education. She lived an active lifestyle, frequently playing basketball and working as a lifeguard. On Saturday, March 21st of 1998, Amy Lynn Bradley left aboard Rhapsody of the Seas from San Juan, Puerto Rico, and traveled to the island of Aruba, where it arrived safely. 2 days later, on March 23rd, it departed from Aruba, traveling in international waters. Its destination was Curacao, Netherlands, Antilles. It was during the early hours of March 24th, while approaching Curacao, that Amy Lynn Bradley vanished. The night prior to her disappearance, Amy had been hanging out with her brother Brad, and the two decided to drop by the ship's nightclub to do some dancing. A videographer who was also present in the nightclub was filming the venue and unknowingly captured some of the only evidence of the events that led up to Amy's disappearance. Watching the footage, you can see Amy dancing and enjoying herself. She had been drinking for quite some time by this point and was very likely more than a little intoxicated. During some of the footage, Amy can be seen dancing with the bass player of Blue Orchid, the ship's band, a man by the name of Alistair Douglas, who went by the nickname Yellow. This can be seen in footage as well. Amy didn't return to their room until around 3:40 a.m., where her father Ron awoke as she entered the room. Brad had already returned and told Amy that he loved her before retiring for the night. According to Ron, Amy claimed that she'd been feeling a bit seasick and wanted to get some fresh air while she slept, so she decided to sleep out on the room's balcony. Her father awoke again later and looked out on the balcony through the closed glass door and could see Amy asleep, and as it was still early, he ended up drifting back to sleep himself. It was merely half an hour later, at roughly 6 a.m., when Ron woke up once more, but this time the balcony door was open slightly, and Amy was gone. Amy wasn't the type to wake up that early in the morning, especially after such little sleep. He figured she must have gone to the top deck, so he wasted no time in heading up and looking for her, but he couldn't find her anywhere. The now worried father was confused, as Amy wasn't reckless like this. It was entirely unlike her to just up and leave and not say anything. Upon further investigation, Amy's family determined that she had clearly changed her clothes and had taken her cigarettes. It seemed as though she deliberately planned to go somewhere between 5:30 and 6 a.m., but no one had seen Amy leave or even where she was heading, until a witness eventually was found. The witness claimed that she had seen Amy with Alistair Douglas, the bass player for the ship's band, and the two were walking together up to the deck above her. Around 10 minutes later, Alistair returned by himself. Amy's brother Brad mentioned that shortly after Amy's disappearance, Alistair said that he, quote, felt bad about what happened to her. This was obviously more than a little odd for someone to say so early on, when authorities hadn't even been alerted yet towards Amy's disappearance, and a thorough search hadn't been conducted. According to Amy's family, the ship's crew were generally quite interested in her, more than they seemed to be in the average passenger. Her mother, Iva, recounted that a waiter of one of the ship's restaurants had approached her and Ron and asked where Amy was, because he and a few other people he knew wanted to take her to a place called Carlos and Charlie's. Despite feeling uncomfortable with the waiter's forwardness, once Amy returned to her parents, they relayed the message to their daughter. Amy immediately appeared unsettled and firmly stated that they were creepy and she wasn't going to go anywhere with them. Amy had also mentioned that Alistair Douglas had been hitting on her rather aggressively, and that she thought he was a jerk and had told him to back off. This makes the fact that she was seen with him at all, never mind the fact that he was the last person seen with her, even more bizarre and suspicious.
Yep.
But there was something even stranger that occurred involving the band. According to Amy's brother Brad, he went to look for her after Ron awoke their mother at about 7 a.m. to tell her that he couldn't find Amy anywhere. Brad was soon approached by members of the band who said they were, quote, sorry to hear about his sister. But this was before anyone had been alerted that Amy was missing to begin with.
Weird.
Despite the consequent investigation, no one within the band has been deemed a suspect by authorities in Amy's disappearance. Her family pleaded with the crew of the ship to put out a message on the loudspeaker, but they refused to due to how early it was, and the ship was beginning to dock as it arrived in Curacao. The family begged for the crew not to drop the gangplank, not to let anyone off the ship, but the crew was surprisingly resistant towards helping. They only made an announcement once most people had already disembarked for the day. Around lunchtime, the captain allowed the ship to be
that's
searched,
super
yet nothing turned up. He told the family that he had searched every area of the ship and hadn't found Amy, so she must not have been on the ship anymore. When the family requested that he put out a photo of Amy, the captain refused, saying it would disturb the other guests. The captain went on to say that Amy had likely gone overboard, but that was highly unlikely for a couple of reasons. The first reason was that Amy was a very strong swimmer, but also, despite her love for the water, Amy was not fond of the open ocean and found it frightening to a degree that she wouldn't even step up to the railing on the side of the ship and had to be convinced to by her family when they assured her that they would hold on to her. Despite a 4-day search by the Dutch Caribbean Coast Guard, who utilized 3 helicopters and a radar plane, there was no trace of Amy found anywhere. Amy's family believes that she was kidnapped and sold into sex slavery operating on the islands, and that she was still alive, and unfortunately, there's some evidence to support this theory, and an important piece of it came in the form of a lead from a man named David Carmichael, who had been visiting Curacao in August of 1998, about 5 months after Amy disappeared. David was at the beach when he spotted 3 people walking close by, a young woman and 2 men who walked at her sides as though they may have been escorting her somewhere. The woman had 2 visible tattoos, a Chinese symbol and a Tasmanian devil spinning a basketball. Amy had 4 tattoos in total, a sun on her lower back, a gecko around her navel, and a Chinese symbol on her ankle. And on her shoulder was a baby Tasmanian devil spinning a basketball. There's no doubt this woman would have been Amy. The woman made eye contact with David as they got closer, and he later stated that she appeared as though she wanted his attention and was going to say something to him, but as soon as she tried, the men she was with forced her away, and David soon lost sight of her. It wouldn't be until 9 months later, when David saw a segment on TV discussing Amy's disappearance, that he realized the woman he saw on the beach that day was definitely Amy Lynn Bradley. But this was far from the only lead. Another came from a U.S. Navy officer in 1999. He was visiting a brothel when he was approached by a young woman who begged him for help. She said her name was Amy Bradley, but the officer had never heard of her. He told her that there was a naval ship very close by, just down the road, but she insisted that he didn't understand. She couldn't just leave on her own. But as the officer had no idea who she was, and no clue she was missing at all, and because he would have faced consequences if his superiors found out that he was in a brothel to begin with, he left. He later saw Amy on the cover of People magazine, much to his shock. The Bradley family was contacted in 1999 by a retired Navy SEAL named Frank Jones, who claimed to have a number of capable professionals working beneath him who would be able to track down Amy's location and bring her home. The Bradley family put their faith and their money into Frank, who happily took the latter and blew it all on drinks and gambling instead of finding Amy. Eventually, he claimed to have found Amy and assured the Bradley family that he was preparing a rescue operation, but that it required additional funds. All in all, the Bradleys, with financial assistance, paid Frank over $200,000, for which he never delivered on a single promise. Thankfully, he was later charged, convicted, and ordered to pay back the money, as well as sentenced to 5 years in prison, but the family's time after Amy's disappearance was wasted. One lead in particular came years later and remains to this day as one of the most shocking of them all. The Bradley family received an email from a sender who wished to remain anonymous 7 years after Amy vanished. In the email, there were 2 photos that appeared to show Amy with long hair, wearing revealing clothing, and in suggestive poses. The photos came from a website for sexual escorts and were found among many other photos of different women with their names, or perhaps more accurately pseudonyms, beneath each set of photos. One in particular stood out to the sender, a woman labeled Jas, and the Bradley family believes that these photos are likely of Amy herself, and they're far from alone. Many forensic specialists have also examined the photos and images of Amy and have concluded that when measuring certain features of the face that don't change over time, it's a solid match. It's impossible to confirm if the woman named Jas and Amy are truly one and the same, and it's unlikely it will ever be found out either. Also in 2005, 7 years after Amy's disappearance, a woman named Judy Maurer was in a department store restroom in Barbados. 3 men entered the restroom escorting a woman who they began to threaten once inside, telling her that they'd kill her if she didn't follow through on a deal. Once the men had stepped out of the restroom, Judy approached the woman, who was clearly distraught, to make sure she was okay. The woman told Judy her name was Amy, and that she was from Virginia, and it was at that point that the 3 men stormed back into the bathroom and took Amy away. Judy contacted authorities and provided a description of the 3 men, of which composite sketches were made, yet all 3 men have never been identified. Some sources claim that other sightings of Amy occurred within the vicinity of the department store that same day, potentially with a 4th man escorting Amy with the others. They all allegedly walked in a fashion which kept her surrounded. Unfortunately, nothing has come from this lead. As time has passed, more leads have surfaced, yet most have quickly fizzled out. But one potential answer to Amy's condition arrived over a decade after she vanished. But tragically, due to a lack of care from authorities, it was never investigated and was especially discouraging and upsetting. A jawbone washed up on the shore in Aruba in 2010. However, due to the international attention Natalie Holloway was receiving due to her disappearance, authorities only checked to see if the jawbone belonged to Natalie. And once they determined that it wasn't hers, instead of testing it for one of the other missing persons cases they had before them, they chose not to test it further. And so the potential closure for the Bradleys or any other suffering families desperate for answers regarding their lost loved ones was snuffed out. The Bradley family has endured immense heartache and have had their hopes shattered many times in their search for Amy. And on March 24th, 2010, 12 years to the day after her disappearance, Amy Lynn Bradley was declared legally dead. Yet the Bradley family still holds on to hope that they will one day be reunited with Amy. The FBI is currently offering a $25,000 reward for any information that could lead to the recovery of Amy Lynn Bradley or to an arrest conviction for those responsible for her disappearance. The Bradley family is also offering a $250,000 reward for any information that leads to the safe return of Amy and $50,000 for information leading to her current location. If you have any information regarding the whereabouts or disappearance of Amy Lynn Bradley, please contact your local FBI office or your country's nearest American embassy or consulate. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the revisiting of this case, and be sure to try out Fishing Clash. They help to make this episode possible. And when you try out my sponsors, you help me to make more for all of you. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Yep, that's a really tragic case. What is it with, police incompetence on this shit? Oh, I I gotta read it. Dining room alternate
He's our
cutscene.
old partner, you know.
Okay, let me handle this. Stay alert!
A dining room.
Investigate if you hear any gunfire.
Oh, yeah. Now when going back into the dining room, turn around and leave again. Doesn't Barry stop you? Yeah.
Lost courage already? It's not like you.
Go see Barry after that cutscene to leave the dining room again.
What? What is this?
What is it?
Blood. Jill, see if you can find any other clues. I'll be examining this. Hope this is not Chris's blood.
Who is it?
You took so long doing all those other cutscenes that the zombie just said, "Oh, screw this," and he just came through the door by himself.
Run, Jill. He's insane!
Run, Jill, he's insane!
What the hell?
Let's report this to Wesker.
And you see more of his body's chewed up. See his legs are gone. Standard mode force will stay put and the crows will what? Attack you only when you examine his pecked corpse. Playing advanced mode, you have a different outcome if you examine Forrest. Also good to note, you don't have to examine his corpse. You just have to pick up the grenade launcher and leave. and then he has the mansion key. Have you not taught this child? Oh, okay. Sorry, guys. Sorry about that. The plant glitch. Okay. Walk up to the plant to start its animation and go back to the door you came. And aim and do full circle stop at an angle. That's angel. You misspelled it. Towards the wall. Then while walking and running forward, hug the wall and you should get past it. Oh, 4 viewers. Hey, nice. Can even pick up the herbs most of the time with no trouble from the plants. Okay, then things are still whipping her ass and putting her in danger mode. That can't actually be the showcase. Girl, she's about to die. What are you even doing? Okay. Faster way to look for Wesker and cancel the berry cutscene. This one's for all the speedrunners. There is a faster way to look for Wesker. Just go behind the stairs in the main hall. I would do that anyway. Like, I didn't need a guide to tell me that.
Wesker! Help me look for him, Jill. And don't leave this hall for the time being. Find anything, Jill?
Nothing. What is this all about? I can't figure it out at all.
Beats me, too.
Now, Jill, can you go?
I'm going with you. Chris
You
is
can
our
even
old
beat Barry to
partner,
the
you know.
blood in the dining room and
Okay,
cut out the cutscene with
me
him
handle
completely.
Stay alert.
A dining room.
Advanced mode secret. Advanced mode is just normal playthrough. Okay, yeah, I already knew that. Another bot? Yeah, I had to take care of it. Can't farm dodge bonuses as Nikolai and 3 mercenaries without bot spam, can I? This time if you go on the advanced... Wait a minute. This time if you go to the advanced mode icon holding on the D-pad and wait for a couple seconds. It'll turn green? What does that do? Now this I didn't know, yeah. Now when you pick up ammo or items, the amount will be doubled. Oh. $30. Oh. Well, that's handy. Bonus, ammo behind the red jewel statue. Go to the second floor of the stairwell by a dark room statue at the end of the passage has more than just a jewel. Oh.
Hey, it's up to us to take out Umbrella.
What's next? Is it gonna talk about how Advanced Mode Jules wears a dope alternate star's uniform with sleigh combat boots? Yeah, I love her Advanced Mode outfit. It's awesome. Didn't know that. I knew that, see. There are certain versions of RE2 that might not have ammo behind the statue or inside the wrecked helicopter cockpit outside after you put out the fire with the valve. Interesting.
Midnight Motorist, one of the most frustrating pieces of lore we've been given. Usually the FNAF community can mutually decide upon a few theories that would realistically work or be what Scott was probably trying to get across. But this minigame caused arguably some of the biggest confusion since the FNAF full box, and has since been left unsolved. Today we're going to dig deep into every detail we're given and see if we can finally solve who the orange and green guys are, who the 2 children are, why there are rabbit footprints in the backyard, what is this secret pile meant to represent, and the biggest mystery of them all, what is Junior's? Is it a location we've seen before, or someplace new? Midnight Motorist is a minigame in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, the 6th main game in the franchise, which can be accessed and played through the arcade machine of the same name. Within the minigame, you drive a car and try not to get hit by other cars while gaining a higher and higher score. Although randomly, a hole will appear in the bottom wall, which if you go in, leads you into a more detailed minigame where as an orange man you walk around, finding a multitude of things such as a place called Junior's where a green guy tells you that you can't go inside, a hidden place containing simply just a pile of something in the ground, and a house containing a child watching television, and another child should would be there, although after knocking on their door multiple times, you go around the back to figure out that he's gone, and the game ends. Digging further into the code of the game though, we learnt this minigame is called Later That Night, which helps us place this on the timeline as most likely after the death of Charlotte, aka the possession of the puppet. How did everyone get to that conclusion, since it could be later literally any night of this entire story? Simply due to the answer of our first mystery, who was the orange guy. The identity of the orange guy can be solved by simply remembering, who else have we seen colored like this without having a lore reason for being that color? William Afton, who has always been colored purple and has since been dubbed the purple guy, which coincidentally or not, the exact opposite of orange guy's color on the color wheel is purple. Another piece of evidence proving William is the Midnight Murderist is simply because the car that's used is purple, which may seem a bit on the nose, but we've seen the same purple car in the FNAF 2 minigame, which we know is the first time we saw William kill Charlotte, so we can comfortably place this in the timeline. This information helps us quickly answer a few other questions too, as it would make this William's house, this as Michael, due to the color code for his text being the same color code as FNAF 4 Michael's text, and also considering the nod to when we, as Michael, watch TV during Sister Location, that being the only other time a TV has ever been in FNAF besides once again being within the Afton house. And this would all most likely make the child who ran away the crying child, due to the heavy security we know is placed for the crying child, which would make sense if he keeps running away to a place like Fredbear's, a place which after this he forcibly gains a fear of. The placement in the timeline, the identity of the orange guy, his house, and the children inside are the only concrete and universally agreed upon theories that came from this minigame that can't really be proven or make sense otherwise, although everything else diverges from here. First, the rabbit footprints can only be either Spring Bonnie if he's heading or was lured to Fredbear's, or Bonnie if he's heading or was lured to Freddy's. These are the only two possible candidates for the footprints due to the timeline placement, and majority of the FNAF community agree it's probably Spring Bonnie's, although a question remains that not a lot of people try to answer. Not who, but why. Why are they there, and why are there no other footprints around it? As if the suit was just standing there. Well, is it possible that if this is Spring Bonnie, that William was indeed wearing it when these footprints were made, but was legitimately just standing there, looking through the crying child's window with the intention of scaring him from leaving again? We see that William is not surprised to see the suit footprints, and we do know from other games that steps have been taken to prevent the crying child from leaving, so would it be that far of a stretch to consider that William's done this himself? Before we try to answer the biggest and main question everyone has, we need to mention the hidden place within the minigame where there's a random pile of something in or on the ground. Now, this would most likely be a grave of some sort, or somewhere to put a body, but whose? Well, there are two possible candidates that would actually make some sense. The first being Elizabeth Afton, who we know, if the timeline that was a joint effort with the FNAF community is correct, dies while Fredbear's and Freddy's are both still open, so everything would still work in timeline order. He could have discovered Elizabeth's body inside Baby, and then gone ahead and dug a hole to put her body near the house, and then continuing to scare the crying child away from the animatronics. Although another theory for the body is who we can only really call Mrs. Afton, aka William's partner and mother of the Afton children. The thing is, this could make sense timeline-wise, but we don't know hardly anything about the mother of the family. She could have died randomly, been killed, broke up with William, all the above, we won't ever know. Both Elizabeth and Miss Afton would make sense timeline-wise and also location-wise, being close to the family house. Now we have the possibilities for all the other questions out the way, we arrive at the two most confusing, frustrating, and simply difficult questions in this minigame. Who is the green guy and what is Junior's? Everyone's first initial thought, due to the timeline placement of this event, was that Junior's represented Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, whether that's
Quit making
FNAF 2's
noises
Freddy's
over
or
there,
not,
Luna.
and that the green guy at the front
Told
is
you to
Henry,
quiet
Charlotte's
down.
father, sending William away because he either knows what he's done
Yes,
to
you
Charlotte
do.
or because William's simply drunk or something. This theory is the most popular theory, although it lacks a lot of true evidence, really. But in its fairness, it could work perfectly fine and does fit, but I think the majority of people, including myself at the time, were simply overthinking it. I don't think Green Guy is Henry, and I don't think Junior's is a representation of Freddy's. How could this be? Why would Scott add not only a new character, but add a new location in what was meant to be the final game in this story? Well, that's simply because Green Guy isn't actually an important character, and neither is Junior's an important location. Hear me out. Junior's is just a random, unimportant bar, and Green Guy is either a bouncer / security or the bar owner. This bouncer simply tells William that he can't go back in, and to not make this a bigger problem than it is. Does this not sound to you like maybe William got drunk, caused issues inside of the bar, and then got kicked out for his behavior? Is it possible that after he got kicked out of the bar, he drove to Freddy's drunk, saw Charlotte on her own, and took his drunken anger out on her, killing her and then drunk driving at intense speeds back home, where once again getting out the car he slouched over, as body posture can be disbalanced while drunk, where he then continues to be angry, yelling at his kids. This would make sense. We've never ever been given a reason why William killed. What was his motive? What if Scott just gave us the answer but we never realized? He killed Charlotte because he was drunk and angry, and that might have made him feel some type of way. Possibly gave him enjoyment or just made him feel better. That when he was eventually angry again, by let's just say due to timeline order, maybe his son dying, wanted to feel that way again and thus continued down his path of murders. What if Scott literally gave us the reasoning, or at least something to be hinting towards it, and we never even realized? So now that you have all the information and know all the different theories, what do you think is the truth of this minigame? The thing is, all of these theories can actually work, but Scott will never give us the concrete answer to which is the right one. So what is the random pile in the ground? Who is the identity of the green guy? And what is Junior's meant to be? And that is the unsolved mystery of Midnight Motorist. Today we're going to talk about the main theory within his video and what mine was going to solve. And that's about the rogue indie game developer, a piece of lore thrown at us that caused a lot of confusion to the point Scott Cawthon himself had to come out and make a statement about it, trying his best to debunk some theories. Although some fans were somehow still divided on what Scott was trying to get across with it.
2 years ago.
The discussion went quiet
I guess it's not that
until
old.
recently, a new story within the Tales of the Pizzaplex series, and now thanks to a new game theory video saying FNAF 1, 2, 3, and 4 events didn't even happen, has reignited said discussion. Today, we're finally going to put the nail in this coffin and debunk what some people claim to be the FNAF reboot, and answer the question, was everything before Help Wanted even real in universe? The indie game developer was introduced to us in Help Wanted, a man who went rogue and made video games based around the events and rumors of Fazbear Entertainment. So then Help Wanted was created to make fun of said games and basically discredit everything that they feature, framing the game developer as a lunatic. But this posed a question. Since they used an image of Scott Cawthon himself as the game developer, doesn't this mean that Scott is now canon in the universe? Meaning that all the FNAF games up to this point actually never happened, and this game is the start of the FNAF reboot? Well, that was the most popular theory 3 years ago, until Scott himself stepped in and intervened, and made a statement about the whole thing, immediately debunking that theory. Quote, how do you take characters that are canon, along with characters that are questionably canon, and characters from every point of the timeline, and throw them all together in one game that is canon? That's quite the problem when you think about it, but it was important for me that Help Wanted means something. I didn't want just a meaningless collection of minigames, although I'm sure most people would have been okay with that. I wanted it to be canon, and that meant that I needed to solve the substantial question of how, end quote. This statement gives us the answers already. The indie game developer storyline helps make this game canon to the main timeline, while featuring characters such as the Phantoms, Nightmares, and Easter egg characters that no one in Fazbear Entertainment would even know about, and some that might not even exist and are simply just there for fun. Scott just needed a link
Is it really
between
having
the
that
past
much
games
trouble
and this game to make it canon, and
bumping
be
up the
able to
quality?
include Easter eggs without automatically making the game non-canon. So the indie game developer storyline is exactly how he did that. I mean, come on, who wouldn't want Lolbit and Ruffles to be canon? If our FNAF games were canon and they were the in-universe games, then that would mean Scott himself is canon. But earlier in the same statement, he says, the short answer is no. My name is never actually mentioned in the game. Yes, I use my own picture for this indie developer because it's an obvious parallel. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually me in universe. This outright confirms that Scott Cawthon isn't canon in universe, meaning Scott Cawthon's FNAF games aren't canon in universe. The in-universe games and our real games are different.
Oh my gosh,
Scott
alright,
debunked this
fine.
himself. This is what the clarification post was about.
Shit.
We even know that there are some differences in the games, such as in Help Wanted, it's shown that the FNAF 3's location burns down in Night 5, within the in-universe FNAF 3. 3. But we know in our real games that FNAF 3 burns down after
it's
night
acting
6
like it's just
/ nightmare mode. That was all debunked 3 years ago, so why is it even a discussion anymore? Well, as always, the books. You probably heard this in Game Theory's video, but within the new Tales of the Pizzaplex book, HAPS, there's a short story called Help Wanted, which seemingly gives us some sort of an insight on the indie game developer.
Are the
thing is,
books
Matt
canon
used
or
this as
not,
evidence that
Scott?
FNAF
Make up
1,
your
2,
mind.
3, and 4 are just video games in universe. They aren't real, and the events within them didn't even happen. But doesn't it prove otherwise? The indie game developer is confirmed to have made and finished 3 games, but wasn't able to finish the 4th. This would help differentiate the in-universe games and our real games even more with what we know in Help Wanted. The sister location animatronics that we know from our real games are from the 5th game, are in the in-universe 4th game and 4th location. Sister location / FNAF 5 simply wasn't made within this universe, leading to them combining the stories together for the 4th and final in-universe game, as we see in Help Wanted. What doesn't make sense with this theory is that if FNAF 1 to 4 aren't canon, but Sister Location, Pizzeria Simulator, and Ultimate Custom Night are, then how come those canon games directly reference and talk about what happens in FNAF 1 through 4? Another thing that should be mentioned is the fact that within Security Breach, underneath the Pizzaplex, we straight up see the FNAF 6 location, further proving that we are still indeed in the same timeline as Scott's games. All the events did happen and do exist. The thing is, Scott has made fun of the dream theory multiple times before this, so wouldn't this be a complete 180? This is basically the dream theory 2.0, saying that all the events in games aren't real, and instead of claiming it to be a dream in universe, now claiming it to be video games in universe. But still the same concept that nothing ever happened. Scott wouldn't do this. 2 quick things that I want to touch on after watching the game theory video is that he says FNAF AR probably isn't canon, which it undoubtedly is. FNAF AR directly links and leads up to Security Breach with the Vanessa emails and the entire Lewis storyline. Check FNAF's video about why Lewis is important. Finally, he also claims that this all might mean that the animatronics aren't possessed, which we know is just not true. The animatronics are possessed. We literally see in FNAF 3 that when William destroys and opens up the FNAF 1 suits, spirits that were possessing the suits literally come out of them. Something else to prove that they are possessed is the ultimate guide.
I have the
outright saying that the
Silverized
puppet is
book.
possessed and reading the
Oh,
statement.
neat.
One thing that seems
I saw on
certain,
Walmart they're
the
selling
animatronics
Tales from the
themselves have been
Pizzaplex
possessed
books.
by the spirits of the dead children, looking for revenge. This was originally just going to be about the indie game developer and FNAF's reboot rumor, but with Game Theory's video releasing the day I was going to release this video, I might as well go through some of his points and either agree or disagree with them. And unfortunately, I have to disagree with it as it would completely break FNAF as we know it. And Scott debunked this exact idea 3 years ago. But either way, I would now consider the unsolved mystery of FNAF's reboot solved. The one you should not have killed, also known as the Vengeful Spirit and also as Golden Freddy. The one most likely keeping William in this seemingly endless nightmare we see play out in Ultimate Custom Night. But what is the actual name / identity behind them? This is what's caused a split in the theorist community. The discussion forever ongoing, everyone providing a multitude of evidence for their sides. Although it always dials down to 2 people, one side of this large debate arguing that it's Cassidy, while the other side arguing that it's Andrew. Today I'm going to share all the evidence
Who the hell's
for and against
Andrew?
both sides of this argument, and then come to my own personal conclusion with the proof we have. So, let's find out, who is the one you should not have killed? Let's start off with what we know about the one you should not have killed. Identity aside, we know that they possess Golden Freddy with the Crying Child, known thanks to the survival logbook, having 3 different people talking throughout it, one being Michael, most likely the Crying Child, and the one you should not have killed, whose connection to the survival logbook I'll explain later. And yes, 2 spirits within one animatronic can work perfectly fine, due to what we know in the Fazbear Fright series. As within the 4th Stitch Wraith Stinger, 2 souls are talking to each other within one body / animatronic. We also know it's not just the one you should not have killed in Golden Freddy, due to the fact that we know 2 spirits are released from Golden Freddy at separate points, one being in Happiest Day and one during Ultimate Custom Night. It's completely possible and most likely that it's the Crying Child, who's also also in possession, who possessed Fredbear after the bite of 83. And we know that Fredbear is the earlier version of who we know as Golden Freddy, proven thanks to Ultimate Custom Night, where upon trying to kill and or remove Golden Freddy from the night, Fredbear jump scares you instead, which shows they are directly connected. And since you can't kill Golden Freddy anyways, that further shows that Golden Freddy has to be in control of Ultimate Custom Night. Not to mention, we also have the final cutscene of the game to further prove that. To solidify the connection between the two, the one you should not have killed also has to be the one in control of Ultimate Custom Night, as we have voice lines that directly mention the one you should not have killed, which is how we got the name in the first place. But we also hear a voice behind some of the animatronics that's seemingly puppeteering what they say or do. The casting call for this voice is named Vengeful Spirit, so it's not Circus Baby that some people for some reason believe is behind the mediocre Melody's voice lines. So if we've pinned this soul to Golden Freddy, we also know that the one you should not have killed was killed in the missing children's incident, and given life thanks to the puppet and give gifts. Finally, the gender of the one you should not have killed is something that is brought up way too much, honestly. But does anyone realize that doesn't actually change anything? Okay, before you get mad and claim that gender matters and further confirms the identity of the spirit, hear me out. There are two voice lines which call them a male, and the image of the spirit is confirmed to be Scott's son. But there's also three voice lines of the Vengeful Spirit's voice, outright being female. Speaking of those voice lines, the actual casting call for the one you should not have killed clearly states the gender should not be immediately clear. It should work as either a young boy or a young girl. So if it's confirmed that Scott was literally trying to cause confusion about the spirit's gender, why is that ever used for evidence for their identity? That's literally why we have 3 points for male and 3 points for female. He's intentionally trolling us like how he trolled us with Mangle's gender. So can we please agree that the one you should not have killed's gender does not matter and should not be used to further prove whether it's Cassidy a girl or Andrew a boy? So now that we can 100% pin the spirit to Golden Freddy / Fredbear, and we know that gender doesn't help answer their identity, let's finally talk about Cassidy and Andrew, the two main contestants. Starting with Cassidy. The name for Cassidy was found within the survival logbook by Reddit user DPowerful1. We know Cassidy definitely exists because of not only that, but because a scrapped FNAF movie script featured and was named Cassidy, to which Scott called this script the most accurate screenplay of the true story that would be satisfying to the most hardcore fans. Finally, the name Cassidy was introduced on the 1st of March 2018 in the survival logbook. Now, let's go to Andrew, who we learn about in the Fazbear Frights book Bunny Calls short story, The Man in Room 1280. The Man in Room 1280 is basically a representation of Ultimate Custom Night, that a spirit is keeping a man alive against everyone's attempts at killing him. But the man also shown signs of brain function, surprisingly representing REM sleep patterns, but only of horrific nightmares. And that's because Andrew is causing him to endure these nightmares endlessly. This is clearly representing Ultimate Custom Night, and makes us view it more as an endless nightmare produced by the one you should not have killed, other than being literal hell or purgatory of some sorts, which most people originally believed. Finally, the name and or existence of Andrew was introduced on the 1st of September 2020. Back to the identity itself, I'm more than sure it's Cassidy. You may have wondered why I kept referring to the date of introduction. That's because Ultimate Custom Night came out on the 27th of June 2018, only 3 months after Cassidy's introduction and 2 years before Andrew's introduction. The only valid reason people believe it might be Andrew is simply because of the fact some voice lines specifically call the spirit a male. But like I said before, that doesn't actually matter, and is only there to troll us with what their gender may be. And let's be real, if The Man in Room 1280 never came out, no one would have ever questioned the spirit's identity being Cassidy, and it would have never been a discussion. And like I said, that story came out 2 years ago after Ultimate Custom Night did. Do we really want to believe that Scott threw us a random fake name for the other spirit possessing Golden Freddy, literally just so he can reveal it was a troll 2 years later? The short story itself is a representation of Ultimate Custom Night for the books. So isn't Andrew just a representation of Cassidy for the books? This conclusion is without even touching upon or going into the entire debate about the Fazbear Frights being in a separate continuity within the FNAF canon, and an entirely different timeline than the game themselves, which is an unsolved mystery that I promise I have on the list to talk about another day. So in my opinion, the identity of the one you should not have killed, aka the Vengeful Spirit, aka Golden Freddy, is Cassidy. I would now consider the unsolved mystery of the one you should not have killed solved. There's a question that lingers in the back of everyone's minds when it comes to theory crafting and the general FNAF canon, and that question is about the amount of timelines within the FNAF universe. Between the main games, the book trilogy, the Fazbear Fright series, and Tales from the Pizzaplex series, there are a lot of things that connect and overlap between said universes, and a lot that don't. This has led some people to theorize that the Frights, or the Tales, or both, take place within the main game universe. They believe that the games and books aren't as separated as we think they are, as in to the point there's possibly 4 different timelines. So let's find out, within the FNAF universe, how many different timelines are there and what is truly connected to the games. First of all, let's very quickly establish that there are different timelines within the FNAF universe in the first place, and that the book trilogy containing the Silver Eyes, the Twisted Ones, and the Fourth Closet are in a completely different timeline, 100%, no arguments there, which we know thanks to the Ultimate Guide, which states that there is a FNAF universe and that the books simply introduced many elements that later appeared in the games. Without even touching the Ultimate Guide, and we already know that this trilogy is separate from the games due to literally everything that happens within it, namely the fact that Henry is dead before the books even begin. So with that out the way, and with us having established 2 different timelines 100%, it's time to tackle the 2 main questions. Are the Fazbear Frights and the Tales from the Pizzaplex connected to the game timeline? Well, the Fright series have had statements made about their canonicity to the game's timeline before, which we can assume the same applies for the Tales series, stating that they take place within the FNAF universe, and that each book contains 3 different short stories with unique characters and plot lines, some connected directly to the games and some not. Now, in the past, people have taken the some do, some don't point to conclude that they are connected to the game timeline, as in stories such as the Man in Room 1280, which we talked about last time, and mainly the Stitch Wraith epilogues, although in the Ultimate Guide we get more information stating that the Fazbear Frights can provide a window into important concepts, characters, and technology. These elements can help resolve mysteries of the past or seed new things to come. The common theme between all of these quotes and quotes about the original trilogy is that they are providing a better view at the rules the FNAF universe abides by, while not being directly connected to the games. Although the quote earlier said that some are connected to the games, I personally feel that was in the context of the characters and plot lines, and not the entire stories themselves, such as what year the missing children's incident occurs, what Ultimate Custom Night realistically is in the real world, etc. Simply just important timestamps and details, which got referred to when talking about the story as a whole. Quote, let me at least say this, future games will look forward, but look to the novels to fill in some of the blanks to the past. The blanks being the years that things take place and how things generally work. The details, not the entire short story that those blanks are cleared up in. Still don't believe that they are separate timelines? Here's a quick fire round with important differences between the games and the Fright/Tales. In Into the Pit, the missing children's incident includes 6 children instead of the 5 we all know is the true amount. In The Man in Room 1280, Afton has both of his arms. But if the fire talked about in this story is the FNAF 6 fire, then Afton would only have 1. Something else about Afton's corpse is the fact that there's no talk about anything animatronic or robotic like with Afton's case, although we know in both FNAF 3 and FNAF 6 his body is entangled and mixed with the suit itself, with a number of parts wrapping around the endoskeleton, etc. In Help Wanted, we learn that Steve Snodgrass, the indie game developer in the Tales series, was approached multiple times by Fazbear Entertainment in person, but we learn in the games from Tape Girl that Fazbear Entertainment and the indie game developer communicated to each other through emails. In Count the Ways, Funtime Freddy is in a random garage, fully operational, but withering away, implying this would be after Sister Location. This cannot happen because Funtime Freddy was scooped in Sister Location, leaving only its shell behind. And any consciousness or functionality from the robotic parts within it went to Enid and later Molten Freddy. In Coming Home, Susie has brown hair and brown eyes instead of her game counterpart having blonde hair and blue eyes. I saw someone say once, I explained Remnant to someone when it was introduced without Fazbear Frights, and go on to use that as proof that they're in the same timeline. But the entire point of the books is to expand upon certain concepts, such as the concept of Remnant. The quote about the original trilogy explains the book's connections to the games the best. While the books are set in a separate continuity from the games, they are considered canon. Many concepts first introduced in the novels later took hold in the games, while concepts introduced in the games were sometimes expanded upon in the novels, meaning that the books are in their own continuity, aka timeline, from the games, but are canon to the larger and overall FNAF universe. The books tell you the rough guidelines and the rules of the FNAF universe itself, while remaining in their own timeline continuity in order to not affect the game's story. I will quickly mention though that the Tales from the Pizzaplex epilogues are still ongoing and aren't over yet, so they might be connected to the game timeline, only since they have no real connection to any of the short stories themselves and seem to be their own thing and more of a prologue to Security Breach, presumably the endoskeleton being Burn Trap's endoskeleton, but that's a theory for another day. But for now, the Fazbear Frights do not take place in the same timeline as the games. The Tales from the Pizzaplex books do not take place in the same timeline as the games, although the Tales epilogues might take place in the same timeline as the games, which we'll learn more of soon. So I would now consider the unsolved mystery of FNAF's universe solved. The Shadow Animatronics. One of FNAF's biggest unsolved mysteries to this day that appear in FNAF 2, FNAF 3, FNAF 4, Ultimate Custom Night, and FNAF AR. They are such an odd addition to the story to the point people often ignore them on their channels. Sometimes entirely, even me. But today we stop ignoring and Shadow Freddy and attempt to answer to the best of our ability with the extremely little information we have. What are the Shadow Animatronics? Why do they act how they do in FNAF 3? Why is Nightmare directly connected? And what is the reason Shadow Bonnie returns in FNAF AR? Let's find out. Shadow Freddy and Shadow Bonnie are introduced in FNAF 2 as secret Easter eggs, but seem to take on a more serious role in FNAF 3, appearing in the main story minigames, while also still secretly appearing in the office. Shadow Freddy on his own appears in FNAF 4 as Nightmare, who is outright called Shadow Freddy in the files, and they're both referenced slightly too in the minigames, but then they both do not return into Ultimate Custom Night as a fun secret antagonist. But then in FNAF AR, suddenly Shadow Bonnie seemingly takes center stage, having an entire portion of the main gameplay dedicated to them, and then also appearing in a short story in the Fazbear Frights series called Hide and Seek. Anything from then on is just an Easter egg or reference to the two. This leaves us with a lot of questions to answer, but with extremely limited information. And with that in mind, reminder that this is purely speculation and just my best guess with all the information we have so far. Let's begin with what the Shadow Animatronics are. We can't go this entire video without mentioning the most popular theory that arose from their first appearances, and was a pretty consistent theory until recently, which was that they were past employees who died from the springlock failures that we hear about in FNAF 3's Night 4 phone call.
After learning of an unfortunate incident at the sister location involving multiple and simultaneous spring lock failures, the company has deemed the suit temporarily unfit for employees,
and that they've been haunting the franchise ever since. Although that left the question of what their intentions would have been in the night end minigames in FNAF 3. Some say this could be referencing how they felt guilty and wanted to help guide the spirits in the right direction because they weren't able to stop the murders, etc. So obviously that whole theory was just reaching at straws because we had nothing else. But now we're quite a few years ahead and have a lot more lore and new ways that everything works, to the point that I think we can actually pinpoint their existence to something different, as well as Nightmare's existence. For this though, let's skip ahead from their first appearances and go to their most recent appearance, FNAF AR. Did anyone else find this strange? This animatronic that wasn't even too relevant for years just suddenly shows up as a main centerpiece for its own gameplay section. Although when you actually start to look at what this entire section
I never
is
played
about,
or
you'll begin
saw
to know where
anything
I'm
for
heading with
AR.
this. In this section, it's basically a one-on-one with Shadow Bonnie that occurs after you collect too much Dark Remnant, and then you need to shine the flashlight on it multiple times until you win, blah 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 blah. This is quite an odd mechanic. Why does Shadow Bonnie appear after collecting too much Dark Remnant? An interesting point is written about Remnant in the Ultimate Guide, raising a good point that if Remnant is a conductor of emotion, it's possible that Bright Remnant forms from positive emotion, while shadowy remnant is formed from negative ones. So, with this random inclusion in consideration, is it possible that Shadow Bonnie and Shadow Freddy are the ramifications of all the remnant that have come from events such as the missing children's incident? We already know that Molten Freddy has the remnant of the missing children's incident already, so is it possible that there were more ramifications for their remnant than just that? Think about it. We know that the shadow animatronics existed before FNAF 2 even happened, due to them appearing in that game, which would make sense if they came from missing children's incident, but it would also make sense considering FNAF 3's minigames, where they seem to guide the children into finding the killer after trying to find the killer for so many years, or just leading them into being freed from their suits, which all helps ultimately lead to William's defeat. They're never seen away from the children, always seemingly following them. Notice though that after the children are freed and William is defeated, they don't appear again. From then on, we only see references to them both, until Shadow Bonnie appears in FNAF AR, a questionably canon appearance, to connect the idea of remnant to them, metaphorically showcasing how too much dark remnant leads to them, simply showing how the shadows came to be. They are the manifestations of the pain and agony of the souls trapped inside the animatronics, all ultimately forming a single entity. Although, what if it's not that they're both simply created from one of the missing children's incidents, but both incidents separately creating both entities? Shadow Freddy coming from the remnant of the original missing children's incident in 1985, possessing the original animatronics, while Shadow Bonnie coming from the remnant of the second incident, possessing the toy animatronics. That led to the creation of Shadow Bonnie. First of all, look at the timeline of each of them specifically. Both appear in FNAF 2, Shadow Bonnie looking more like the toy animatronic Toy Bonnie, while Shadow Freddy looks more like the original, aka the withered Golden Freddy.
Well, that's true, yeah.
Their looks hint at this difference.
DBD also has a mix between the games and the movie. Yeah.
Service, where the Withered / Originals resides could further imply this difference. After FNAF 2 happens and the toys possessed by the second incident are eventually scrapped and turned to junk, we never see Shadow Bonnie canonically again after this point in the timeline, which would make sense if the second incident children are now finished with and freed. However, we canonically still see Shadow Freddy after they're scrapped, until the original suits possessed by the first incident are destroyed as well, which leads to us never seeing Shadow Freddy again after this point in the timeline, which seems to subtly imply that Shadow Freddy and Shadow Bonnie are the manifestations of both separate incidents. Nightmare aka Shadow Freddy also only appears in FNAF 4 after we see the Nightmare versions of all the original 5 animatronics, which we're now theorizing led to Shadow Freddy. And in Ultimate Custom Night says, "I am your wickedness, made of flesh." Wickedness being defined as the quality of being evil or morally wrong, Shadow Freddy being William's evil, aka remnant from his killings. Finally, I want to mention Midnight Motorist and how some people believe the footprints to be the Shadow animatronics. If you believe this theory, then that doesn't work though. If the crying child is the one heading to that place again, then that automatically puts this minigame in the pre-1983 years before he dies, which means the Shadow animatronics could not be the missing children, unless we want to say that the missing children's incident happens in 1983 before he dies and not 1985, even though every single interpretation so far of said event has always set the date to 1985. So unless for some reason the incident takes place in 1983, unlike what recent sources are telling us, then the footprints cannot be from the Shadow animatronics, like some people believe. More on Midnight Motorist in this video. So, what do you think? Shadow Freddy aka Nightmare being the remnant of the original missing children's incident, while Shadow Bonnie is the remnant of the second missing children's incident. I would now consider the unsolved mystery of Shadow Freddy and Shadow Bonnie, the Shadow animatronics, solved. The Ultimate Guide is basically the official FNAF handbook, full of all the information you need to know about the entire Five Nights at Freddy's franchise, written by Scott Cawthon after the inaccuracies of the Freddy Files. Although fans and theorists alike claim that the Ultimate Guide is still inaccurate and that no one can use anything from it as proof or evidence for anything theory related. This video will be a little different as it's going to be split into multiple sections. I'm going to read the entire book again and then point out its flaws, what it fixes from the previous Freddy Files, point out what it confirms terms, and ultimately come to a conclusion whether we can actually trust this book and use it for theory crafting. So, let's begin. Let's start with the flaws. What are the actual things wrong with this book? And no, I'm not counting spelling or grammar mistakes. To learn this, I reread the entire book, as well as looked through videos from other creators to learn of any valid mistakes that I missed. Although before we begin, I need to make two giant clarifications out the way before anyone starts mentioning these in the comments. 1. Anything under the title of the fan theory sections or anything that specifically says fans believe or fans have said is not counted as a mistake, because they are genuine and legitimate theories from fans that sprung from these games. For example, obviously Purple Guy isn't Phone Guy, but the theory is mentioned here simply because that was literally the most popular and agreed upon theory back in the FNAF 2 days when we did actually think that he was holding a phone in the minigames. That doesn't mean that
I never thought that, but it was a
literally
popular
just
theory.
pointing out what was the most popular fan theory at the time, and I'm sure people are hopefully able to understand when it's under the label fan theories. Scott isn't saying it's true and confirming it by having it there, and clearly starting the paragraph with "there are a few theories circulating." 2. The illustrations are not counted as mistakes either, because the illustrations are mostly always wrong, and we've known that from the illustrations within the other books too, such as the Silver Eyes trilogy, the Fazbear Frights, and this book. So it's not that just this book's illustrations are wrong, the graphic novel illustrations within this franchise in general are wrong. So with that in mind, let's go over the validly pointed out mistakes within this book, and I'll explain my thoughts on why some mistakes have been made and debunk some others which are valid but have a reasoning behind them. First, Freddy and Chica are in the wrong places on the map in FNAF 1, technically. What I mean by that is that this map shows Bonnie left, Chica middle, and Freddy right, which staring at the show stage it would look to be the case, but if you actually look closer you can tell it's actually Bonnie left, Freddy middle, and then Chica right. So I think what happened here is that whoever made this map simply looked at the show stage and put their icons in that order, going left to right. Secondly, Golden Freddy has a purple hat here, despite it being black in FNAF 1. For this, I genuinely think that this is Scott's new Ultimate Custom Night model for either Golden Freddy itself, without its shadows, or Fredbear, because this feels like it was given by Scott himself, simply because searching up Golden Freddy head has literally every single one with a black hat on, and if you try and find this image, it doesn't come up with the exact image. So it doesn't seem like they just searched it up and got it from somewhere, because I literally just can't find this exact image anywhere. In the FNAF 2 section, it claims that 11 animatronics can either kill you or crash your game, which would be the Toys, Withers, Mangle, Puppet, Balloon Boy, and Golden Freddy. And then it goes on to mention 4 others, only there to fill your nightmares, as in not kill you, which would supposedly be JJ, Endo 2, Shadow Freddy, and Shadow Bonnie. But as we know, Shadow Bonnie is the one who crashes your game, so the book separating the characteristic from them is wrong. But as I'm writing this, I've realized that this actually isn't a mistake, because it's removing Balloon Boy from the 11 as he never actually kills you, and puts Shadow Bonnie as the 11 instead. Next, in the Night End minigame section in FNAF 2, it constantly mentions how the game will crash after these cutscenes happen, which isn't true. But it also mentions how directly after this, a code will appear either being or it's me, showing how the game itself doesn't crash. So I think this is simply just mentioning how this is the crash, because it also mentions this for the other minigames that end the same way. As for the others mentioned, I'm not sure what the reasoning behind this one is. On the FNAF 3 intro page, it says that the game takes place 30 years after the events we're not sure of, but we know from the game's actual description that it's the FNAF 1 location closing, but the book seems to know that too a couple pages later. Next, it mentions how sister location takes place within Circus Baby's Pizza World instead of Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rentals, which we know as a fact. But to be fair, we know that the 30 years later thing came due to the game's description of FNAF 3. And in the game description of Sister Location, it welcomes you to Circus Baby's Pizza World, and that they are hiring a technician. So that's where I think the mistake was made. Now, all of these ones here, I really don't know what happened, but I'll tell you the mistakes anyway, which starts with the name Springtrap being used instead of it actually being Spring Bonnie in Stage 1 and in Fruity Maze. It also claims that Susie's story is further explored in Coming Home, despite that being Fazbear Frights as Susie and not game Susie, which the rest of the paragraph was already talking about.
Yeah,
Book
that's not
states that
confusing
this
at all.
resembles Hercules Hospital, even though the poster actually says One Night at the Opera. Next, Ultimate Custom Night Scrap Trap is noted as going through the top vent, even though it's actually Springtrap. But then Scrap Trap also appears in the correct position on the next page. On this same page though, there's another mistake. The puppet appears in the kitchen with Chica and not the prize corner. Next, Plush Trap apparently disappears when you click him, which is wrong as it will go away no matter what you click. Next, it mentions how the scooper is an extractor, but it's actually an injector, which we learn through the Pizzeria Simulator blueprints. It mentions how Ella was later mass-produced, as in following the trilogy events, even though they're entirely separate. The last 5 mistakes are simply just the animatronic inventory section, either using the wrong picture or the appearances are wrong or just missing some, such as how Jack
Well,
Bonnie
that's
is not
sloppy.
in Ultimate Custom Night, the picture for JJ is Balloon Boy, Nightmare Young is not in FNAF AR, the Withers are not listed to be in Curse of Dreadbear, and Eleanor is not listed to be in To Be Beautiful, its main story. So after some mistake hunting, we have 14 mistakes, which, removing animatronic appearances being wrong or missing, leaves us with a separate 10 actual mistakes within this 292 page book. Now, I quickly want to mention the fixes from the previous books, which is that it removed Michael from being Springtrap, FNAF 4 being in 1987, and Michael being the crying child, all removed due to people using its inclusion in the books, yes, even under the theory section, as evidence for some reason that it must be true, and making sure that they are completely debunked. Scott also made sure that Lefty being a device to capture children, and Elizabeth only possibly being William's daughter, were both removed too, as we know the 100% truth about both. So, is it trustable? Yes. Yes, it is. Unlike the other Freddy Files books, Scott is confirmed to be directly and way more involved with this book, giving information on upcoming books as well. Scott was annoyed with the mistakes and or some of the inclusions within the other books, so why would he allow this to happen a third time? The current mistakes, like for example 30 years after events unknown, are simply things that he and us skimmed past and kept reading, unless you're intentionally trying to find mistakes. You wouldn't have realized it doesn't specifically say 30 years after Freddy's closing. There are a lot of times within this book where it specifically says fans should go look here to solve this, and this specifically tells us this, which were left in by Scott to help us. And also, these are some of the things that are confirmed within this book. The only reason Molten Freddy having the missing children's remnant is even a thing is because the Ultimate Guide specifically says it is a thing. So if people take that as fact now, no one can suddenly turn around and tell you that the books have no legitimacy when it comes to a theory that they just don't like. Because as we've seen, it is legit and is trustable. This is Springtrap and this is Scrap Trap. These two designs are of the exact same character, but how did he repair his suit? How did his skull change color? Why does he have more teeth, his eyes, his feet? Scott Cawthon himself commented on the design change, saying that there is actually a lore reason to this.
Oh, really?
So
I thought it was
obviously
just
it's
because he
just
said
going
I'm
to be
not
the
very good at
vibe
making humans.
did this to him. So what is the reason? Well, today we're hopefully going to figure it out. So let's begin. The common theory for most people upon looking at the differences between Springtrap and Scrap Trap is that it's simply some post-fire things, mostly due to the Ultimate Guide describing it simply as just a more worn version of Springtrap. But like I mentioned before, there are way too many differences for this to just happen. So what did happen? Well, for this we're going to have to travel to the books. Within the fourth closet we learn that there are 4 versions of Charlie: toddler, child, teenager, and adult. And we see with the adult version that she's able to turn herself into the baby animatronic we've always known, as in go from human to humanoid to full-on animatronic. How does she do this? With a mix of both illusion discs and remnant, which she uses to transform / morph her own body. We also see a similar thing happen in the Fazbear Frights, where Eleanor takes a pendulum which is made from and charged with remnant and uses its powers of memory to shapeshift via remnant-induced illusions. I believe this is what's happening with Scrap Trap. We can see Springtrap's old skull in Scrap Trap's jump scare, so we know that it's the same corpse, but instead he's created something to sort of shell and protect his vulnerable corpse more, and also to fix up his suit a little bit. If he actually did repair his old suit or rebuilt it entirely, then there wouldn't be holes still, as it would be a completely new suit. But if it's something more supernatural, such as illusion discs and or remnant, then it's easier to understand why there are still holes and mistakes in this suit, and explain why not the entire body is fixed and returned back to proper spring body form. Also take into consideration that we know from what we found that the phantom animatronics are most likely created by Springtrap's agony, and Remnant being able to create them as hallucinations, instead of them just simply being hallucinations, which I think was their original purpose until recently, because we know that they aren't caused by ventilation problems, etc., because they don't appear directly after those problems. Instead, they cause those problems after appearing and attacking. So we know that Springtrap was actually able to make use of these sort of things while being in the Springtrap suit. So it's entirely possible he repurposed Remnant and Agony from the Phantoms into his own repairments and further protection for himself. Honestly though, I do think this is one of those things that don't really have an answer, nor matters too much. Honestly, for all we know, Springtrap just rebuilt himself and that's the lore reason, but I just thought that I should give you all this theory anyways, because who knows, it could be right, and there's no harm in just a theory. Again, theory. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed Season 1 of FNAF Unsolved Mysteries. See you in Season 2 early next year.
Picture this. You're a 36-year-old video game developer who has been discouraged by negative reviews
Jeezums. Turn that down. Shit.
of your previous work. A particularly disparaging review comparing your game's animation to animatronics inspires you to give one last shot at being a full-time game developer, this time taking a different route than usual, with a horror game centered around creepy animatronics. While your previous games hadn't really taken off, this one blew up and turned into an entire franchise, spawning sequels, lore, and merchandise. This is what happened to one Scott Cawthon, creator of Five Nights at Freddy's. Much like games mentioned in previous videos of mine, everything you experience on the audio end of Five Nights at Freddy's is almost entirely made up of royalty-free sound effects. While the sounds of Five Nights at Freddy's have nowhere near as shady of origins as Roblox's, for example, which I've talked about previously, many of them still have interesting backstories. I don't blame Scott either, he wasn't a sound designer and probably couldn't have hired one, and without the usage of these sound effects, the game wouldn't have been as scary for most people. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the origins of sound effects used in the first and second Five Nights at Freddy's games. Five Nights at Freddy's was made with the game development software ClickTeam Fusion 2.5, and as a result, you have to use a program to extract sound files from the game. Unlike other games which have their assets open, accessible, and free to dig around in, FNAF and its sequels hide their assets. You'll notice upon ripping the game's sounds to your computer that most of the sound effects in the game have copyright 2000 sound dogs in the metadata. First, I'll be talking about the atmospheric tracks heard throughout the nights of the first game. The main ambience heard throughout the game is an alternate version of Cold Presence by Eric Haddad. This version is much slower than the original and much darker sounding as a result. The eerie ambience that the player hears when one of the animatronics has moved comes from Sound Idea's Series 6000 sound library, listed under the name Sci-Fi Ambience Giant Hollow Tube Sector. This audio could be purchased for $8 and is much higher quality than the version used in game. Most of the audio files heard in the first Five Nights at Freddy's game are not only low quality, but 49 out of the 52 audio files used are in mono instead of stereo. Stereo audio means you can hear different signals in different ears, like if I were to play a sound only in the right channel, but mono audio means that only one channel's worth of audio is being used. The Windows Scare audio clip is a good example of this, with it being slightly louder in the right ear than the left. On top of that, half of the sounds heard in the game have a sample rate of 22,050 Hz, where audio quality is clearly affected, especially with higher end frequencies. So when you hear the original version of the Giant Hollow Tube Sector ambience, with more than double the sample rate and double the channels, there's a very clear and audible quality difference.
Oh yeah, I hear it in both my ears. It's unknown
if this audio quality was a result of ClickTeam Fusion compressing audio, or Scott buying lower quality alternatives to these audio clips for a lower price. Audio being mono or stereo doesn't matter for most of the sounds anyway, because they end up getting panned in the game, but the low quality audio is very noticeable. It's fascinating how well executed the sound design in the game is, considering it was done with so little. Quickly breezing through the sound effects from both Sound Ideas and SoundDogs.com, the fan and buzzing fluorescent light sound ambience, camera sound effects, crowd of children cheering sound effect, the chime melody that plays at 6 a.m., door sounds, pots and pans rustling, the occasional circus music, sounds that play when the animatronics enter the office while the camera is up, and the music box that plays when the power runs out, all come from Sound Ideas, or Sound Dog's royalty-free libraries. While many of the sound effects used in the game originate from Sound Ideas' libraries of royalty-free sound effects, they still have Sound Dog's copyright in the metadata, as Sound Dogs partnered with Sound Ideas in the past and redistributed some of the Sound Ideas libraries. When you remove the audio with Sound Dogs or Sound Ideas copyright attributions, you're left with 12 sounds, most of which we've already talked about. Most of these sounds are slightly modified versions of Sound Dog sounds, such as the sound effect for Fox's singing, which is a Sound Dog sound effect with an added delay effect. Windows Scare's origin isn't fully known, but it's most likely this is another modified audio from the Sound Ideas libraries or Sound Dog's website. As a higher pitched version can be heard in the trailer, it's likely this version heard in the trailer is the original sound. The powering down sound effect's origin isn't totally clear either. Considering its low pitch, it's likely that this is another sound effect that was taken from a sound library before being pitched down or modified in some way for its inclusion in the game. This is also the lowest quality sound effect in the game, having a sample rate of 11,025 Hz. Here's what it sounds like when my voice is the same quality as the powered down sound effect. The phone calls at the start of each night, labeled voiceover 1 through 5 in the game, were made by Scott Cawthon. These voiceovers, however, include sound effects from various libraries, such as the phone ringing at the start of each from Sound Dogs, and Alien Language 06 from the Sound Ideas Jurassic Dinosaurs sound effects library. And to end my chapter about sounds from Five Nights at Freddy's 1, the screaming jump scare sound effect comes from a 1981 horror movie named Horror Planet or Inseminoid in the UK, which is about a team of astronauts that go to a distant planet and one of them gets impregnated by an alien. The scream sound effect is simply a distorted version of the audio from a scene where the lady gives birth to an alien baby. No, I am not joking. X Scream 2, the Golden Freddy jump scare sound effect, is a much lower pitched version of the same scream.
Yeah, I'm not listening to that.
As a quick interlude between the two chapters, I'd like to point out that Five Nights at Freddy's and its sequel are essentially navigatable slideshows. Everything you see in the game is a sprite inside the game, instead of the 3D models being imported into the game and moved around inside the code. For example, the cameras are still image files inside the game's files. Anyways, on to Five Nights at Freddy's 2. Just months after the successful release of Five Nights at Freddy's 1, Scott Cawthon releases its sequel. I surveyed about 200 people from my Discord server on what the most iconic sound in the Five Nights at Freddy's series was, and one of the most common responses was the ambience heard when an animatronic gets close to the office in Five Nights at Freddy's 2. This is another slightly edited Sound Dog sound effect, edited to make it loop better. What's interesting is that the sound can no longer be found on the modern-day Sound Dogs website, but it can still be found on sites like Pond 5, which is another popular free sound effects website. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 sounds are a lot less interesting than the sounds of its prequel, as almost every sound in the game is a Sound Dogs sound effect with no interesting backstory. However, there are still a few audio files used that have interesting details to note about them, but this section will be way quicker. After the introduction cutscene upon opening Five Nights at Freddy's 2, the first thing you hear is the Sand Temple by Bjorn Lin, but not the whole song, instead one of its many variations. The Sand Temple by Bjorn Lin is a cinematic royalty-free track composed in 2002. On sites where licenses to the song can be bought, 12 variations of the song can be found and bought for lower prices than the whole track, which is sold for $34.95. 10 of these variations are loops, with the iconic Five Nights at Freddy's 2 title screen music being the 7th loop, titled Loop G. Scott bought this music during the game's creation for $10. nightmares. This same composer also created Urban Darkness, the title screen music for Five Nights at Freddy's 1. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is the first time we see sound effects likely created entirely by Scott himself. These sounds are Cake 2, Coin, Effect 3, and Pop, all of which are incredibly simple sounds which can be made with the simplest of equipment. Balloon Boy's Hi and Hello voice clips both come from the Nightingale voice box sound library, but it's worth mentioning that the Hello is meant to be the voice of a 6-year-old boy, while the Hi voice clip is labeled as being from a girl, despite their voices almost sounding exactly the same. The ambience, intro sounds, static, save them speak and spell dialogue used during minigames, Balloon Boy voice clips, chimes, mask sounds, vent walking sounds, and music box music are all from Sound Dogs with little to no modifications made to them. In comparison to the sounds with sample rates as low as 11,025 Hz in the first game, 13 sounds used in Five Nights at Freddy's 2 have a sample rate of 8,000 Hz,
Oh, sorry,
a
had to
sample rate
sneeze.
with less bandwidth than your average phone call. Most of these low quality sounds are the sounds heard when animatronics call through the vents, cut out of longer audio files from Sound Dogs libraries by Scott himself. To end this video, I'd like to say that a lot can be made with even the most bare bones of resources, which is why Five Nights at Freddy's turned into a globally known franchise, despite its humble origins. If you enjoyed, do things you do after you watched a video you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.
Interesting. Eh.
As a kid, I was raised in a small fishing community on the eastern side of Canada. Surrounded by the Gulf of St. Lawrence and
I think I
rural
first heard
forests.
Creekcast.
The entirety of the land
this.
is close to 4,000
So I
foot
basically
square, with
know
an
what
even
happens.
smaller number of residents sprawled out over Main Street, the main road running straight through our little town, and farming houses spread wide between areas of trees that were changed to domestic residential homes when agriculture stopped being profitable. In total, our community is surrounded by a vast expanse of ocean, and a seemingly endless barrage of trees that spread over 55% of Canada's entire country. I spent most of my life hunting in those woods, so you can imagine my joy. My parents got me a hunting dog. Sandy was a Shetland sheepdog, and while they were more fit to be herding and tracking sheep over grassy plains rather than rabbits and deers through dense forest, it didn't stop me from taking him with me on every excursion I possibly could. Sandy had been by my side for enough hunting trips that he'd grown accustomed to waking up just before breaking daylight, and on a few occasions, helped track down small game like squirrels and rabbits through considerably large areas of forest. Sandy wasn't my property, and wasn't treated like he belonged to me. Sandy was a member of the family, my best companion, and my truest friend. I think back on all the times he'd sit in the front seat of the truck without being told, ready to go for a walk in whatever part of the forest I told him to. I can honestly say there'll never be a dog that will fill the void Sandy left in my life. I find that dog lovers relate to that sentiment more than others. It was October 30th, the first day of deer hunting season. I'd been talking with my family about taking Sandy, my hunting gear, and a few essentials to one of the cabins my grandfather owned in his heyday off an unmarked road a few hundred miles into the wilderness for a few days. This was met with a lot of protesting, but nothing could stop me from getting in some time looking for wild game in an area that wasn't already picked clean by illegal hunters earlier in the month. Everything was packed into the old blue Ford, Sandy included, and a few hours of driving later, we were setting up camp at one of my grandfather's secluded old cabins. Here's where things got fucked up. Sandy, I'm so sorry. I'd spent most of the time of my life being in the wilderness. There were only a handful of times that things had gotten weird for me, but usually everything could be explained with scientific reason. That's why I brushed off Sandy's weirdness in the first few nights, chalking it up to the nervousness of a dog that's capable of hearing the far-off noises of various coyotes, wolves, bears, and moose. This was untouched territory, of course. There had been plenty of time for wildlife to set up camp here, too. The first night was fairly normal. I had set up Sandy's bed in the corner of the living room next to the TV that looked like it had come from the early 90s. I figured I'd give Sandy the option to have some place to lay down for a while, despite the fact that he slept curled up with me 9 times out of 10. Close to 10 at night, Sandy looked straight at the wooden door and whined.
Oh my
I
god.
figured he needed to piss and opened the door to let him out, not worried about having my best friend stray too far from me. Instead, he just sat inside the door, looking out at the forest edge beyond
That's
the path.
creepy as hell.
I, too, stood and looked for a few minutes before deciding he had just heard an errant creature close to the cabin. The rest of the night was fairly normal, and Sandy slept with me fine. The second night, I chalked the weirdness up to Sandy's stress. Earlier that day, we had been walking a few miles through the woods beyond the house, and I thought I heard the sound of twigs cracking under something heavy. I hoped it wasn't a moose because my shotgun wouldn't have stood a chance, but something changed in Sandy that I didn't pay close attention to at the time. He hunched himself on his hind legs, his foot pressed close to the ground, his mouth pulled up over his teeth, and he growled towards nothingness. I figured we should try hunting later, if whatever it was had left, and should he be feeling up to it. But once we were inside, he didn't want to move. Even when I tried to get him up to go outside to do his business, he sat at the door and cried, wailing at me to let me know he didn't want to go out there.
Poor baby.
I didn't pressure him. If he pissed on the floor, so be it. Sandy never acted up before. I could excuse an accident or two if he really didn't want to be out there. It must have been a bear, I thought, before locking the door and calling it a night. The third night is where things went to hell, listeners. And I still don't fully understand what happened. Sandy didn't eat all day. I managed to shoot a rabbit in the early morning, and when Sandy decided he didn't want to be outside any longer than he had to, and retired inside for the day, I cooked it up, threw a little gravy on it, and gave it to my dog. I didn't do this all the time, but I figured now was a special occasion. Maybe a treat would put him in a better mood for another walk the next day. Sandy didn't touch it. He didn't so much as sniff it. Instead, he sat at my side on the couch, watching the doorway intently. I tucked him under my arms, and he laid his head on my lap, eyes still locked on the door. Close to 3 hours of watching grainy VHS tapes on an outdated television set, Sandy started crying, hugging himself close to my body. Now, this is where my judgment took me down the wrong path for the first time in many. It must sound silly being my dog's protector rather than my dog being mine, but this was my family. I figured if there was something out there that was scaring Sandy so bad, then it was my job to do something about it. I loaded my 410, opened the door, and stood in the doorway and waited. I must have waited at least a half hour staring into nothing. There was barely any sound save for the faint buzz of insects and leaves rustling in the cold autumn wind. Moose aren't elegant creatures, and if it were a moose, I would have heard it coming. Around the 40-minute mark, Sandy took off like a shot into the darkness of the trees beyond the path, barking wildly. I started to get worried. Despite my knowledge that my dog isn't entirely helpless in the wilderness, there was bigger animals that would have liked to take a bite out of him if there wasn't a lot of food for the winter. I heard Sandy's barks fade away into the distance, and then stop altogether. I waited hours, standing in the doorway with my shotgun cocked and ready to put down whatever it was that was waiting in the woods. I waited hours for Sandy to come back to the house. I waited until sun was cracking through the trees, and then I waited until that night, sitting on my porch step, feigning off sleep deprivation to see my dog come back. Sandy did come back. But Not for another 3 days. Fog had rolled in at that point, and it was getting darker. The night painted the sky a navy blue. Tracking over the last few days proved futile, and I started to get worried that I needed to leave and find more provisions to last me the next few nights. I couldn't leave Sandy up there, lost in the woods, cold and probably hungry. The thought that he might be waiting out there for me to find him and bring him back home was distressing enough. I was packing the bag that hung on the coat rack next to the door, with what I'd need for the next day's trip. I figured tomorrow would be the last day before I'd go into town and see if my father would help me find Sandy. He was a retired grain man, but I was sure if I brought up Sandy's name, he'd be more than willing to help me search for him. And thankfully, Sandy came back before I'd even finished that train of thought. I saw him from the window on the porch that led down the main road a few dozen feet away from the house. Normally I'd hear him scamper up to the doorway and paw at the door a few times, eager to come in, but this was different. I could see the reflection of his eyes as green pearls in the murky fog that had swamped the house. For a moment I thought it might be an animal, but the outline of his body in the wisps of thick, low-lying clouds was unmistakable. Still, despite myself, I hesitated. There was something different about his body language. I stared out the window for a few more moments before reason overcame my gut instinct. Sandy could be hurt, I thought. Or worse. I flung the doorway open, but he didn't come right away. Instead, he stood there, watching me intently, and when he didn't move, I whistled to him. "Here, Sandy." I coaxed him toward the house. "Here, boy." The way he moved was different. It was as though his hips had been dislocated, and the angle of his paws changed direction with every step, as though he'd forgotten how to walk properly.
Weird.
His head was bowed to the ground, but his teeth weren't bared. He didn't seem aggressive. The only way I could describe the way he looked was sheepish. Like he'd just gotten into something he wasn't supposed to, and I yelled at him for it. I thought he might have hurt himself hopping up onto the elevated step if he dislocated his hips, but he did just fine. His back half swung a little, oddly enough, and his paws almost folded underneath himself, but he didn't go sprawling. He sat on the step and didn't take his look off of me.
That's so fucking creepy.
It wasn't until I moved from the doorway completely, opened the door wide, and waited for him to walk in that he moved. Straight to his bed. He didn't stop at my hand and sniff at me. He didn't wait for pets or jump up on me like usual. He was straight to his bed, where he sat and watched me for quite some time afterward. I returned to the movie at hand. I called him a few times, but he didn't respond. His ears didn't so much as raise to the sound of my voice, or the pat of my hand on the worn-out couch beside me. I had missed my buddy, but I wasn't about to move him physically toward me. There was something about him that said I shouldn't have let him in. But I chalked it up to silliness, and a few hours later I went to bed. The more I think back on it, I don't recall him blinking once. He sat there like a statue, and when I turned off the light, I could see the reflection of jade green following me.
Oh my
As I went
god.
into my room and shut the door.
Screw that. This dude has
I could have
some
sworn I heard him
balls
walk
on him,
in the
man.
The sound of nails clicking against the wooden floor coming up to the door of my room, but they were slow and deliberate. They weren't like the quickness of Sandy realizing I'd gone to bed and coming to curl up. I heard the noises stop outside of my bedroom, but I didn't hear his whine. I thought nothing of it and fell into a deep sleep. When I woke in the morning, I figured it must have been a dream. Sandy was still sitting in that upright position I left him in when I went to bed. It was as though he hadn't moved a muscle the entire night, and when I said good morning, he didn't so much as wag his tail. He did follow me into the kitchen, but he paused at the doorway when I put his bowl down on the floor and filled it up with supermarket dog food. Once again, his back half moved weirdly as he slowly made his way towards me. There was a nagging feeling that something was off-putting about the way that he looked that day. It was like he'd gotten a little longer overnight. Sandy hunched down again, like when he was walking to the door that night. He didn't come into the kitchen. I figured he must have been hungry being out in the wild for so long, but he eyed me like he was waiting for me to come a little closer, rather than touch the food. It goes without saying, but after a few moments of a staring contest between me and my unblinking dog, I called off that foolishness and called his name out loudly. Not even a flinch. I didn't want to move closer to my dog to leave the kitchen door. But this was my Sandy, and the most damage he'd ever done was eat flies. Sure enough, as I passed him, he turned, and his body swayed unnaturally. But he didn't move towards me. When I left that day, I couldn't find anything. The deer tracks in the mud were made a few days prior and went cold off naturally made trails through the woods. I couldn't hear bugs, birds, even the howl of a nearby coyote. The only sounds from miles away from the campfire site were my own breathing and the sound of crunching leaves underneath my feet. When the sun started to set, I started making my way back. But I should have just packed my shit and left. Just behind a cluster of trees, with the house just visible beyond the rise, I figured I'd found out the reason why the animals had abandoned this place. Generally, when there are mass animal deaths, that usually means that something is wrong in the area of the slaughter, and wildlife are usually smart enough to get the hell out of Dodge. Even cats are bred instinctively not to like drinking from water that is close to where their food is, because if you saw a dead animal near a stream, you'd figure the stream was tainted and find another source of water. Hundreds of squirrels were disemboweled and strewn across the grass in almost perfect circle.
Oh my god.
Most of them were skinned alive, but when I turned to heave up all the contents of my stomach, there were a few dozen that were inside out.
Ugh.
I couldn't help but vomit repeatedly as I tried my best to walk around the circle of tiny organs and mashed up bodies.
Ew.
Not just over the sight, but because the smell was ungodly. I didn't know how long they'd been out there. If I'd stumbled across this sooner, I'd have left with Sandy in tow immediately afterward. Gradually, the bodies stopped and delved off into a random dead squirrel here and there. The biggest thing I managed to find just a few feet off the unholy feeding ground was a deer. It looked as though something had decided to skin it alive from hide to neck and draped some kind of skin over a branch like someone was tanning the hide.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know how long it had been there, but it smelled like it had been dead for quite some time, despite the fact that there wasn't a single fucking fly. The head had been cut clean off just above the shoulders, and when I realized the organs had been removed, I moved from a walking pace through the forest to a jog. Thankfully, the cabin wasn't too far off. I heaved one final time, wiped my mouth off on the back of my sleeve, and looked up to the house to see Sandy.
Why is he staring up a window like that? It's so creepy.
From the window. I tried to reason with myself. I tell myself Sandy's odd behavior could have been trauma. I know it's stupid to think of it now, but at the time, it was the only reasonable explanation that I had to keep myself from going insane. The elongating body could have just been loneliness getting to me. Sandy had realized there was something up with this place, and the second he noticed it, I should have taken this warning and taken off back into town. Once the door was shut behind me, I started packing the food and essentials back into boxes. moving quickly to try and get my things into the truck before night came. It'd be dangerous to try and maneuver my way through the trails at night, as the hills off Kelly's Mountain were steep. And in pitch darkness, with my only companion being my headlights, it would have been easy to slide off a ravine and never be heard from again. I didn't want to stay one more night. But I had no choice. I'd gotten back to the house just moments before the sun finally receded past the horizon, and we were bathed in a navy blue sky once again. I didn't pay attention to Sandy. He just sat at his bed and watched me pack. I figured, no harm, no foul. I'd throw his stuff into the truck in the morning and be back in town before night that next day. Glancing at him for a moment, there was a passing thought that he was looking a little longer today. When I went to bed, it was a hard time getting to sleep for the next few hours. It must have been close to 4 or 5 in the morning when I finally heard it. The sound of whistling, the same whistling that I used to call my dog.
Oh no,
I broke out
that's
into a cold sweat
freaking
when I
skinwalker,
realized
dude.
that whoever slaughtered those squirrels, hung the skin up, left what he didn't need, could have very well broken into my house. The door to my room didn't make a sound as I opened it slowly, thankfully. I waited a moment, listened to someone call my dog for a few more seconds before I dared poke my head out from the door frame just to get a good look at whoever it was. It could have hurt Sandy. The outside door was open. All I saw was the back half of Sandy, too long and lanky, almost coiled around the back of the door. His front half was outside. Whatever it was that had impersonated my dog was whistling slowly, calling for Sandy. When I could have sworn that it had hunched down to the ground again and said, in the most ungodly voice I'd ever fucking heard. I closed the door just as softly as I opened it. I don't know how long I waited. With my back pressed up against the door, I knew I left my gun in the bag on that coat rack. I know I didn't sleep. I waited until I saw the sun break over the horizon. Then I waited some more until it must have been midday. And I finally got the balls to open the door again and make a break for the truck. I wouldn't die in that place. Sandy was gone and the door was open. His food was untouched, but the fridge was open and all the meat was gone. I didn't bother packing his stuff. I just threw my bag over my shoulder, made my way to the fort as fast as I could, turned on the ignition. I can't describe the feeling that overcame me as I realized that I'd have to leave Sandy in this place. The thought that he could be dead was never a thought in my mind. I don't think I could cope with the knowledge that whatever I allowed into my house, whatever disemboweled those animals, could have done the same to him. I made my way down the winding paths and roads as fast as I possibly could without veering off the cliffs. I felt like I was turning in circles down this labyrinth that would take me back to that house. But when I reached the pavement on the stretch of road back to town, I felt relief wash over me. Thinking I was safe. Just as I was pulling off onto the cement, I felt something hard hit the back windshield, sending broken glass into the passenger seat. I only got a glimpse of the deer's decapitated head catching on unbroken glass and tumbling into the back seat.
Oh my gosh.
And I cried for most of the way back home, hands clenching the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. I wish I could leave this off with a positive note. I wish I could tell you that I found Sandy at home waiting for me. I wish I could tell you that was the end of it, a traumatizing experience in the woods that I'd get over in time. Last night I found it hard to sleep. I kept replaying the entirety of my trip to Kelly's Mountain in my head. I figured I wouldn't be sleeping for a while and laid there, listening to the wind through my open window. I could have sworn I heard the whistle I used to call my dog.
Oh.
Come from the forest edge.
Mm-mm.
If you go on trips with your dog, guys, I advise you don't let them out of your sight for too long. What comes back might not be your dog.
Oh my god. Mm-mm. Don't do this to me, come on. Oh, okay.
Of all the characters I would ever call FNAF's main antagonists, none of them have been done quite as dirty as the final boss of Five Nights at Freddy's sister location. Ennard is an amalgamation of the various animatronics seen during that game, combining together in order to scoop your player character, wear him as a skin suit, and escape into normal everyday life. After discarding the rotting corpse outfit, Ennard would seemingly wander the sewers or other places until they had split into two beings, Scrap Baby and Molten Freddy. The problem is that I feel neither of these characters work better as separate entities. I love Ennard as Sister Location's final boss, but they've had such a limited appearance since then that I wouldn't blame anyone for simply forgetting about them. That's where today's series comes into play. This was a series I had initially discovered through Daco, and while I thought what he watched was good, I didn't really take it all that seriously until I saw even Theft King was posting about it. So then I thought, well, I have to sit down and watch it. Reach Animations is an animator who has done primarily FNAF content on their channel, with their main series being what's known as the Incident Logs, and this is where Ennard comes into play, as they serve as the primary antagonist of the series. Currently, there are 3 what I would call chapters or seasons of the Incident Logs, but in the first season, most of these videos are very short, with a longer video thrown into the mix. For this video, I plan on only reviewing the first chapter of the story, with reviews of chapters 2 and 3 coming later down the line if this video gets enough support. Normally these videos are some of my most popular, so we'll say that if this video can get 100,000 views, I will make a part 2 covering chapter 2. Seems fair, right? Oh, and to those of you who enjoyed my video making an AI write the FNAF story, I will be making a part 2 to that as well soon. Without further ado, let's get into video 1, Anomaly Report. Anomaly Report opens with a login page for what appears to be a camera system. We can see various menu options, but the one we're focused on is the one clearly labeled Anomaly Report. This appears to be a fragment of video documenting movement anomalies in some sort of Freddy's location. We first see Funtime Freddy stomp into view, and the camera flashes for some classic FNAF teleporting. When he leaves, we hear some metal clanging and banging, which, if I'm not mistaken, is taken directly from either FNAF 2 or Ultimate Custom Night. Either way, it's the sound of someone crawling in the vents. In the darkness, you might start to notice something metal dangling from the ceiling. It's the vent door swinging open, and down they descend. Ennard. I think, anyway. This Ennard definitely isn't your garden variety animatronic amalgamation. With a much larger mouth, more closely spaced teeth, and a general scarier appearance, this Ennard haunts and skulks closer to the camera before we switch to a screen of his face. It opens up and reveals to us a spirit, I believe. Now, this isn't that unusual. We know that Ennard does have Elizabeth Afton's spirit inside them, but this Ennard is definitely different. It's also odd to see Funtime Freddy walking around moments before Ennard appears, since Funtime Freddy should theoretically be a part of Ennard. This video is creepy and introduces us to the mystery and terror pretty damn well. Although it's rather short and the ending scene isn't that original, it actually reminds me of a lot of Baddington stuff, I'd still grade this an 8 out of 10. Video 2, Performance Compromise, starts very much the same as the last one, on the same screen. This was when I realized that every episode would begin like this. These are the incident logs the series was named after. We see whoever's checking these logs try to click on BI58 ! Bunch of characters, but the system's not gonna let them, so they instead decide to watch Performance Compromise. The video begins with the camera switching on, turning and facing Circus Baby and the Fun Times on their stage. It's unclear if this is at Circus Baby's party rentals or if it's at Circus Baby's Pizza. While Baby and Ballora move and dance, it seems like Freddy and Foxy aren't interested in performing today. While ordinarily this kind of insubordination is met with a controlled shock, this time it's met with some zoom-ins. But while the cameraman is zooming in on Freddy, we can see Baby turn and stop, staring at the camera guy, watching him closely. When the camera guy zooms out, the lights go out. All of the animatronics are staring his way now, although I can't really tell if Ballora is there anymore. Through one glitch in the video feed and what sounds like rapid footsteps, Freddy and Foxy vanish. We hear a carnival tune start and Baby's face begins to glow. It's actually the same carnival tune you can hear in a lot of Squimpus and Baddington stuff. Callbacks be callbacks, I suppose. When the song is over, Baby's face stops glowing and we see the camera UI vanish. We then hear on the left side something especially terrifying in stereo. Someone says the words, "Hello there." Turn to the left and we get a very nice montage of ghostly Sister Location animatronics. Congrats, Reach. In under 4 minutes, you've scared me more than Sister Location did in about an hour. In the last animation, we see what seems to be Circus Baby, and we see the face of Spring Bonnie come out of the darkness. Cut to black. The remaining few seconds are just blackness and static. But overall, this video was damn good. There's plenty of build-up, and the whisper in stereo, oh, it was icing on the cake. If I wasn't a bit dead inside, I might still be scared. The only thing I really don't like about this video is the little orange and red jig Fun Time Freddy and Baby do at the end, but then it does show Spring Bonnie is a part of the story, so it's forgiven. 9 out of 10. The next video is Animatronic Maintenance Fail, which, aside from sounding like a 2016 prank channel video, is also a really strong showcase of Reach's narrative sensibilities. It begins once more with a login screen, and it's really beginning to deteriorate. It was glitching a bit in the last video, but now it's getting pretty bad. Interestingly, when we're logged in, we see both Anomaly Report and Performance Compromise have been purged from the logs, and I have reason to believe who could have done that, but we'll get to that later. For now, our user tries to select the purged file, but is eventually greeted with the message, "You can't." They settle with watching some prank videos, and our tape begins. We open on the scooping room, it looks like, although it could be the parts and service room. Either way, we're in the rental service now. Funtime Freddy sits on a table, waiting. He's missing his right arm, which also means he's missing Bon Bon. Poor guy. We hear machinery start up, but then some facility workers talking. Something jammed the secondary motor of whatever device they're trying to use. They try to reset the controls, referring to whatever they're working on as the right arm. So maybe it's Funtime Freddy's right arm? Hate to say it, guy, but you're probably not going to get that working from a computer. We hear that they're still working on it, but they will eventually reattach it to Funtime Freddy. We see a mechanical arm come down, carrying Freddy's arm. One technician tells the other not to screw up reattaching it, which I think is some pretty good advice when it comes to handling these things. Freddy's arm is attached and the mechanical arm retracts. Suddenly, Freddy activates, which alerts the technician who is controlling the reattachment. He holds up his mic like he's going to start singing and his arm as if Bon Bon was attached to it. The techs question why Freddy was powered on, to which one of them basically just goes, "My bad. Look man, you told her not to screw up, but if anyone's getting killed, it's gonna be you." They begin vocal testing with Freddy, who says one of his famous lines from Sister Location. As the techs want to move on though, Freddy says another line, "I see you over there in the dark." The techs rightfully question why this happens, and one of them volunteers to take a quick look. "I'm sorry dude, but right now you are officially the most dead person in the room." He shines his light out the window onto Freddy, and he decides that it was probably just a malfunction. I'll be honest, I expected him to actually go out and look at the animatronic instead of just flashing a light around. Suddenly, the lights go out, and a red alert siren begins flashing. In between these red flashes, we can see Ennard, but then the lights come back on. I guess that kinda confirms my suspicions earlier. Whatever this Ennard is, it probably isn't the Ennard we're used to seeing. The female tech then complains about the security system in place and drops a word which I can't use, and honestly kinda caught me off guard. The techs talk about what could be in the vents. The British one, who took a look earlier, describes how usually it's a mass or a piece of debris, but one time they did find something unusual. The American guy tech wants to know what he means, but the female tech is done with stories for now. It's then that they, and honestly I, notice that Freddy's faceplates have opened up. The female tech then straight up calls Afton out by name, telling him to fix his damn robot. Oh ma'am, I applaud you. But congratulations, you've now beaten the British guy in terms of the most dead character in the room. Although oddly enough, it seems like Afton actually showed up. William Afton actually marches over when the tech calls for him, and Afton tells them to reboot the system, and Funtime Freddy powers down. However, before they can get him to turn back on, it seems like all the power is cut out, and everything goes dark. There's a bit of light after that, as it seems like someone is searching the area with their flashlight. All the while, the techs and Afton argue about how many problems they're having with the computers and robots. But Funtime Freddy is gone. When Afton realizes this, he tells them that they all need to leave, and they do so. We see a light glide over the screen and eventually land on Ennard, who seems to be hanging upside down off of some of the dangling wires. They turn their head to correct their vision, and Afton says that they're performing as expected. Cut to black, end of tape. Okay, wow. There was a lot to go through here. What I thought would be a series simply filling in the blanks of what happened between Sister Location and Pizza Sim seems to instead be going back further. For some reason, there's an Ennard that existed before Sister Location, and one who seems hostile, but also seems to be Afton's own little experiment. I think the person who purged those files earlier, back when it said you can't, was Afton, hiding the evidence that Ennard even existed. This video was great, and surprisingly narratively driven, although not as scary as the last one. 9 out of 10. Next up is 1000. When we log in this time, very briefly a D shows up on screen. I was a bit confused by what this video was since it wasn't listed on the logs previously, but in the description, it becomes very clear that this is Reach's 1K special. Pretty cool stuff. I'm honestly surprised it took them 3 high quality episodes just to reach 1K. In fact, they're still pretty criminally small, so please check their channel out after you finish this video. Although they are larger than me in sub count, some of my videos tend to actually garner more views than this series. I'd highly recommend checking them out. But on with the video itself. We come to the file screen again, with the maintenance fail video now being changed to the word no. Well, that's pretty blatant. After selecting no, we're brought to a black screen, and suddenly the word override appears on screen. After some beeps of overriding, I guess, we see the number 1000 appear. It's clicked on, I guess, and we see the locked FNAF 4 box. Oh god, I think I'm having a heart attack. Anyway, eventually one of the locks on the box starts jiggling and falls off. The second lock does the same, and the box begins to rattle, as though something is trying to get out of it. The lid opens slowly, and Ennard's head rises out of it, making this gross guttural sound. He sits up, and I can only imagine how cramped he is in this little box. Unless it's like a damn hammer space. The image turns ghostly, shit yourself white, and cuts to black.
Shit yourself
Thank you
white.
for 1,000 subscribers. Episode 4 is coming soon. So overall, this video is short and sweet, just a little thank you to Reach's fans. However, it does actually give us one really good bit of lore, that this Ennard was what was in the FNAF 4 box, meaning he was probably relevant during the Bite of 83. It's not really clear what he is yet, but he has extremely strong ties to William Afton, and maybe the entire Afton family. I'm not gonna rate this video out of 10 considering it's just a thank you video, but I will say that it's a damn good one. Episode 4 is Security Compromise, and it's the longest video of this first season. It's also the one that starts to really carve out a story. These aren't just random events thrown together to make Ennard look scary, there's a reason for everything we've seen so far. This is also where names start to become important to the series, so after I go through this episode, I'll list out what I believe the timeline is so far. Keep in mind, I haven't seen the next 2 chapters yet, so this will be from the perspective of someone who's only using the FNAF series lore and the lore of these videos. Regardless, let's begin the analysis. The video starts with typing on the screen. Given the typing is green text on a black background, it would appear to be coding of some kind. However, it's illegible, so we'll continue. We fade in on a man's face. I'll be cool with you and just tell you this guy's name and who he is right now. This is Clark Williams, and he was one of the techs in episode 3. Specifically, he was the one who told the female tech not to screw up. We hear a phone ringing. Clark is calling someone, and when he's not able to get through, he leaves a message. Apparently there was an accident in the elevator shaft, and a man named Tim has been injured. We then cut to Ennard crawling over a body with what sounds like chewing? Is Ennard actually eating that corpse? We cut back to Clark's face, and he tries to call again, but once again he gets voicemail. This time, Clark's message is more frantic, and he gives us the name of who he's been calling, Toby. Clark is distraught and says that Toby needs to get there right away. It's serious. The last thing he says is, "Don't let us down," and then the phone hangs up. We hear Clark call one more time, voicemail picks up again, but after the beep, Clark says 2 words. We cut to black and see messages start appearing in the bottom left corner of the screen. Was it worth it? Was this your plan? What was your reason? Who knows? But either way, once I find you, I will kill you. Afton. Now I have my theory as to who is saying this, but it's very directly targeted towards William Afton. Moving on, we're brought to footage of a car driving through the woods, apparently towards the facility of the accident Clark described. This character is Toby Kirkland, and we find out that the reason he never picked up the phone was because it's 2 in the morning, but he's on his way there now, apparently to perform a preliminary investigation before police arrive. Toby questions what really happened, having been told that Tim was mauled by a fan blade in the elevator. He apparently doesn't like the use of the word mauled, but based on what we saw earlier with Ennard, It's accurate. Toby also says he's sick of Afton's attitude and how he suspects something fishy is going on. He really wishes he picked a different career. We then cut to black and another face fades in. Ladies and gents, this here is our William Afton. William describes how because of how ambitious he was with his experiments, he's been put under investigation by the police. However, he also reiterates that everything that has happened so far has been according to his plans from the very beginning, including the death of Tim Holliday, and that the main reason he's doing this is for the fun of it and to make Henry suffer. Henry, who by the way, in canon is the co-founder of Freddy's, William's business partner. He then goes on to describe Ennard as a beautiful, ugly, horrific freak of nature, and praises it for remaining hidden despite the chaos it has caused. He closes out this evil monologue by saying that anyone who hears this recording should start running. We cut back to Ennard bent over Tim's corpse, before vanishing between flashes of camera static. Just before the camera switches, in red text in the bottom right it reads, "Don't leave." Who this is referring to, and who it's being said to, continues to be a mystery to me. Maybe I'll come up with an answer by the end of this. We then cut back to Toby driving, having apparently visited the facility, but more importantly, having seen Ennard. He's panicking, rambling, and just before the camera bugs out, we see a picture of Afton in the top left of the screen. Cut to black, we can hear sirens in the distance, and we see images of a mangled wreck. It seems that in trying to make his escape from Ennard, Toby crashed his car, either because of Ennard, Afton, or simply panicking too much to drive effectively through these narrow trees. We cut to the camera by Tim's body once more, with Ennard now looking into the camera, moving almost as though he were breathing. The camera freezes on a still of his face, and another. We're brought back to the login screen. The password is typed in. We come to the incident log, but there's nothing left. Purple text reads out. Look at that. Gone without a trace. Don't worry, you can have it back. Once I'm done with you, Henry.
Excuse me?
The video glitches out, cut to black, end of the tape. Wow. First off, I'm just gonna say it, 9 out of 10. Alright, so that tape gave us a lot of info, with the only thing we're really missing now being some explanation on what this Ennard really is. But here's how I think the story's going so far. William Afton created Ennard as an experiment, but also to ultimately act as a monster with which he would seek revenge on his business partner, Henry. This would either be done by killing Henry with Ennard outright, or more likely, killing those associated with him in order to make Henry potentially look bad. However, Ennard, still within Circus Baby's party rentals, begins causing problems for staff there and turns the place into a sort of hunting grounds. This ultimately culminates in a night wherein Ennard kills a worker named Tim Holliday, with another worker, Clark, blaming it on the broken elevator. Toby Kirkland is called to the scene, however he spots Ennard. Ennard chases Toby and causes him to crash, killing Toby and thereby any witnesses to the truth. William Afton is detained after having 2 deaths take place on his own property, but he considers this a minor setback. And Henry, for whatever reason or another, is finding out the truth through stored incident logs, which Afton is then deleting to make sure they can't be used as evidence against him. Overall, I love this story so far, especially with how it's using Ennard. But it's not over yet. There's one more episode in this first season, so we'll watch that. But first, that text earlier, "I will kill you, Afton," I think that is actually being said by Henry here, which is odd because Henry is the one watching the incident logs, but that's the only way I can make that line specifically make sense, and I still can't really reason what the red text means. BI58 bunch of characters begins with that login page once more, with the text now broken and the screen much darker than before. And what do you know? Good thing I had my subtitles on, because in the brief moment a password shows up on the screen, so does a link. Following this link brings us to a Google Drive with an audio file attached. The audio is Morse code, which when translated comes out to Season 2 in 2022. Ooh, I can't wait. We continue on to the incident log, and oh my god, Morse code. That's great. Starting to get FNAF Plus flashbacks here. The message this time spells out, "Don't do it." The last incident recorded is BI58 bunch of characters, which I presume Henry presses because we then cut to black. We then get another piece of Morse which reads out, "I warned you." Damn, Henry, if only you knew Morse code. We're brought to an image of Ennard, complete with analog horror eyes. Given this was 2021 though, I'll let it slide. For now. Cut to Ennard freaking out in a little jump scare montage, and we're brought to a screen that says extracting security logs. That has to be a good thing, right? We see a backdoor override code used, and then the file names for the anomaly showing us a bunch of very thumbnail potential pictures of Ennard. We're asked if we want to extract the source code, and then the screen cuts to black after an option is selected. I'd say which it was, but since we don't actually know for sure yet, we'll just say that an option was selected. Suddenly, a new screen pops up showing us different computer components for access. The source is selected, and we're given 3 lines of text. Power active, drive active, and kill switch 0. We see the 0 turn into a 1, and the subtitles also give us the word free. It seems whatever just happened, something somewhere was set free. We come back to Ennard's face, this time without the analog horror eyes. See, it got better. The mouth opens and we see that he begins to speak. Where am I? Where is my body? It isn't bad. Somehow I feel free. I'm okay with this. Okay, for real, that might be the funniest thing I've ever read in a mascot horror anything. Please forgive me. Ennard's face fades out and we're brought to a stark white image with the text tape number 5 appearing before us. And these are the credits? Really? This is a 5-minute video, and for real, the credits take up half of it. Not saying there shouldn't be credits, but that ending was kinda sudden, don't you think? But it seems like this episode did give us a lot to chew on. If I had to guess, it was Afton warning Henry against messing with the code. But when Henry activated the kill switch, it's as though something changed inside Ennard. I don't know if the spirit inside him was free, or if it was free from Afton's programming, or anything like that. But in that moment, Ennard stopped being the monster we knew him as in the previous videos. He was pacified. But then that leaves me with more questions. I think it's clear by now that the Ennard in these tapes is not meant to be the same Ennard we see in Sister Location. This version not only seems more primal and aggressive, but it also seems to have been pacified and set free. It also refers to itself as one entity, not like the Ennard hive mind we know from SL. Perhaps this will be answered in seasons 2 and 3. Until then, I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into a series I wish I discovered a long time ago. Seriously, I haven't found a series this underrated since Spectre's videos, and for that reason, I think I ended up really enjoying talking about it. So please, share this video around and I'll get working on a part 2. Otherwise, be sure to like and subscribe.
Who remembers Dead Realm? I've had this game sat idle in my Steam library with a mere 3.7 hours of playtime since August 2015. During this period, the game was an internet sensation, garnering tens of millions of views on channels like Vanos Gaming. Even during its bleak periods, Vanos would still grant this game a massive spotlight, achieving well over 8 million views a video. With that, where is Dead Realm now? I guess you could say, in the Dead Realm. Whilst you can still play the game peer-to-peer, dedicated servers and support ended in August 2020. So this begs the question, how did a game observed by literally hundreds of millions of people go from being an internet sensation to closing in just 5 years? This video will explore that question, along with who developed Dead Realm, the marketing behind the title and the controversies surrounding it. This is the failure of Dead Realm. First off, let's explore what Dead Realm was for those who don't know. Dead Realm was an asymmetric multiplayer indie horror game consisting of 2 sides, the humans and the ghosts. The original game mode, Seek and Reap, had the humans try to survive the duration of a round to win against the ghost, with the ghost's objective being to reap the humans, converting them into spirits who would then go on to reap more humans. As I stated, this was the original game mode, which many of you would have already seen and perhaps even played, but it's worth noting that there were other game modes added to this early access titles such as Hide and Seek, Bounty Mode, and The Hunted. The game was developed by Section Studios, with it being their second title released on PC and published by a company called 3 Black Dot. 3 Black Dot was founded in 2013 by former Machinima executives, which I guess answers the reason why they also included gaming influencers with the likes of Vanos, C-Nanas, and the Syndicate Project. The main premise of the publisher was to rely on influencer-driven content to thrust their projects into the light. Dead Realm was no different. The game was developed with this idea, the idea of influencers playing the game with each other to ultimately release content on it, in turn generating interest and sales for the game. This approach worked wonders for the influencers involved, some generating upwards of tens of millions of views per video. The title was released into Steam's Early Access program on July 30th, 2015, with a full release planned sometime in 2016. I know the Steam store page has a different date, however, founder of 3 Black Dot, the Syndicate Project, claims the game was released on July 30th, 2015. Alongside the early access launch, various gaming YouTubers released videos on the title, excitedly playing the game, demonstrating how much fun they were having with each other. This game left a good impression on many people, evident by the view counts alone, not to mention how quickly the game rose the ranks of the Steam charts, grabbing the #1 spot for popular new releases in its first day, with it also claiming the #1 spots for both the horror and indie categories in the following days. Viewers loved watching their favourite YouTubers play this game, and considering it's the only form of marketing it received, alongside a launch trailer, you could assume the initial release wasn't terrible, and you'd be partially correct. Just 2 weeks after the game launched, Steam Spy reported that 3 Black Dot had sold 70,000 copies of the game. But this was not all good news for the publisher, as these statistics were publicly released on a Gamasutra article, which also called out the shady business practices of the company. The collaboration between YouTubers Vanos Gaming, CNanas, and the Syndicate project with 3 Black Dot wasn't merely a collaboration. Instead, these YouTubers were actually founders of the company alongside the ex-Machinima executives. Not only this, they were also creative directors of Dead Realm. This high-level association with 3 Black Dot means the videos produced by the aforementioned YouTubers could be seen as an advertisement or sponsorship for the game. Their endorsement of this title, without them coming clean about the financial ties to the project and the potential monetary gain they'll receive from sales, is shady, and potentially violated the FTC regulations on disclosure in promotional videos posted to YouTube and elsewhere. 3 Black Dot did release a statement regarding this issue, but failed to address the elephant in the room. These YouTubers didn't adequately disclose their financial ties to Dead Realm. That could be seen as deceptive behavior for monetary gain, something the FTC is clearly against, as stated in the .com disclosures document. It's worth mentioning that in Vanos' first Dead Realm video, he did in fact tell everyone he was associated with the project, but at the end of the video, which is still very wrong. Ethically speaking, ads or sponsorships should be disclosed at the beginning of their promotion. Syndicate also did state in his description on the first Dead Realm video that he was a founder of 3 Black Dot. However, using my best friend the Wayback Machine, we can clearly observe a snapshot taken on July 30th, 2015, with that being the launch date of the game and this video, with the original description having no mention of Syndicate's association with 3 Black Dot. So credit where credit is due, this was updated, but this was too little, too late. Thankfully, Vanos would address this in future videos, seemingly reluctantly however, though the damage was already done, as the game had received the bulk of its sales during the launch period. Section Studios were committed to become one of the only developers to make it out of Steam's early access program. With a full release being the ultimate objective, the game would receive content updates to expand on the replayability, adding new maps, ghosts, game modes, as well as fixing bugs and optimizing performance. Initially, Dead Realm received these content updates on average every 2 weeks between the launch in July and November. Right now, we're amid the peak of Dead Realm's history, with it gathering the most playtime and attention according to the Steam charts. That's no surprise. With the frequency of the updates and October being just around the corner, it was a good time to be a multiplayer horror game. But it was all downhill from here. The rate of content updates quickly came to a halt. Aside from an announcement in April 2016 promising some form of update soon, the developers went quiet for almost a year before releasing their next update in October 2016. That is too long for a multiplayer game designed for content creators to make videos on to go without updates, and from this point, Dead Realm's fate was sealed. Despite their best efforts to relight the fire for the game by increasing the frequency of content updates once again, there was only one way the game could potentially be saved from closure. And that would be to exit early access and fully release on Steam. May 25th, 2017, an announcement from the Dead Realm team revealed the game would leave the early access program. This was exciting news, and one of the YouTubers involved with 3 Black Dot released a video on the game again, trying to spark up some interest for a project they're associated with. However, this attempt would fall flat. Leaving early access and content creators making videos had no noticeable effect on the amount of players playing the game, according to the Steam charts. Dead Realm was as good as dead. In another small effort to relight the Dead Realm flame, 3 Black Dot would work with a company called Game Mechanic Studios to work on a VR spin-off game titled No Way Out, A Dead Realm Tale. However, this game was doomed right from the beginning. The title was shockingly short for the price. Not only that, No Way Out failed to integrate into the VR space properly, having players control the game with a gamepad rather than the controller supplied with your VR headset. The game was horribly dark, Not scary, just pitch black, and was reported to have numerous bugs by the unlucky players who bought this title.
Yeah, pitch black
In my
does
eyes,
not equal
it's an obvious
scary.
attempt at a quick cash grab on a niche market. There was no innovation on the current state of VR with this title, with there already being higher quality games on the market. Come to think of it, isn't it crazy how far VR has come in the recent years? That's definitely a topic I'd like to explore in the future. The duration between 2017 to 2020 would be a slow and painful demise for the game, and ultimately led to an announcement from the Dead Realm team on August 20th, 2020, stating that the game's dedicated servers along with support would discontinue in just a week. August 27th, 2020. Consider the view counts Venos received. I want you to place a number in your head about the peak player counts of Dead Realm. The view count probably wasn't as high during the launch, but 23 million total views is a lot, especially for one video. Did the game have a peak of 20,000 players? 100,000 perhaps? Maybe even 250,000 players in October 2015, the prime time for this game. The peak was 1,800.
Oof.
Now, I would argue that that count seems incredibly low, especially given the numerous YouTubers involved with the project and the many videos revolving around this game. Dead Realm was observed by many people, but not played by many people. Why was this? There was a grave problem associated with this project. Let's take a look at a quote from one of the CEOs of 3 Black Dot. This is the first time that a game has been developed in partnership with online influencers with the primary goal of creating content that's not only fun to play, but also fun to watch, share, and stream. Here lies the problem with Dead Realm. The game was designed with the idea for YouTubers to make content around it, to collaborate with each other to entertain viewers. The quote itself is evidence of that, the primary goal of creating content. Viewers of a YouTube channel tend to not be YouTubers themselves. They don't want to get scared at a multiplayer horror game or create videos. Instead, they want to be entertained by watching their favorite content creators be scared, which is the reason behind the view counts being extremely inflated in comparison to the actual player counts. Here's an interesting question. Why has Dead Realm failed, but Dead by Daylight hasn't? Dead by Daylight was late to the party by almost a year, releasing on June 14th, 2016. Right from the release, the game was immensely popular in comparison to Dead Realm. But on the outside, they seem like the same game. Humans hiding from a monster don't get caught. The games even followed a seemingly similar marketing strategy, though one company approaching it in a very different way. Dead by Daylight hosted a beta period between May 31st and June 12th of 2016, which streamers were invited to with beta keys to not only use them themselves, but also to give away to their viewers, in turn generating hype around this new title. This gave the game an explosion of exposure to new audiences, and the very fact that gamers who managed to get a key were able to give the game a test run without paying a single penny thrusted this game into the spotlight, immediately overshadowing Dead Realm. Not only that, Dead by Daylight had much more substance, with the levels being randomly generated, leading to a different experience each time you played. Humans had actual objectives to complete, contributing to an escape plan over just playing a simple hide-and-seek-esque game mode, and the general replayability is the cause for why Dead by Daylight is still succeeding today. The game has also been notoriously generous with the amount of discount promotions available to entice players to buy this title. This, mixed with the free weekend promotions on Steam, is just another cause for the sustained player base of Dead by Daylight. This is just scratching the surface of what Dead by Daylight has done right, and might deserve a whole video for itself. The stark contrast between the titles is uncanny. Both games were designed to make money, as games usually are, but the simple fact that Behaviour Interactive was willing to let players play Dead by Daylight without spending a single penny helped this game to thrive. Whereas Dead Realm's main objective seemed to be to make money from influencers' audiences without offering anything substantial in return. Dead Realm. What a story. I can't actually believe how few gamers played this title. Just the view counts alone set this game up for success, only for it to fall so hard. If anything, this just proves that while you can market your game with influencers, they alone cannot carry your project. A game without a loyal community actually playing it is doomed to fail, and Dead Realm proves this to the T. Of course, there are outliers in this industry. Some projects continue to thrive even after a boost from influencers. Do you know any titles that followed this marketing pattern successfully? Were you one of the gamers who actually played Dead Realm? What were your thoughts on the controversy if you knew about it? I only discovered that whilst making this video. Feel free to discuss this with me in the comments just below the like button. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out here. We're nearing that glorious 1,000 mark. If you're interested in watching some more of my content, consider checking out the failure of Telltale Games, or learn about the fall of the Battlefield franchise by clicking one of the end screen cards now.
Oh, the video was drowning me out. Oh, I'm so sorry. But I'll be glad when I got my laptop back and get back to a better quality setup and get back to playing some games for you. Alright. Alright, let's see. Is there anybody to read? Luna.
What?
Shush. Too loud.
Just tell the story.
Shaiban. Let's read Shaiban. Alright. Bye. Bye. Alright. Thanks guys for watching the you know what, you could put that if you want to, Merc. But yeah, thanks for joining the Sunday stream. I might stream again tomorrow. We'll see what happens. Let's hope my PC is ready soon. Oh, goodness. Alright. Love you guys, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye.